you're on.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Please find some seats. There are some seats on the left side of the room. Welcome to the March 1st. It's March already. The March 1st meeting of the Glendale City Council. May we have roll call, please?
Council members Devine?
Here.
Friedman?
Here.
Garpetian?
Here.
Sinanian?
Here.
Aaron Najarian?
Here. And we have some special guests who have come from Mark Keppel to lead us in the flag salute. Will the members of the Mark Keppel Student Body Council please come forward to the podium? I'm going to ask that each of you introduce yourself by your name and your grade. I know you're all in the same grade. And then once you've introduced yourself, you can lead us in the pledge.
I'm Roxanne, and I'm in the 5th grade.
I'm Jen, I'm 5th grade, and I'm the vice president.
I'm Andrew, I'm in 5th grade, and I'm secretary.
I'm Sophia, and I'm in the 5th grade, and I'm the activities director.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. And I'm going to turn it over to you and give us the instructions that we need to follow to say the flag salute.
Please stand.
Put your right hand over your heart.
Ready?
Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, please remain standing for the invocation, which will be delivered this evening by Chaplain Al Garcilaso from Glendale Adventist Medical Center.
I invite you to bow your heads as I offer the invocation. Dear God, we are grateful to be here tonight at the City Council meeting. This meeting, as simple and as routine as it may seem, reminds us that we live in a great country, a country that respects the civil and religious freedoms of its citizens. As we gather here tonight, I pray that you will bless our mayor, our city council members, our city staff, as well as the residents of Glendale. May we continue to shine and be an exemplary city in the state of California. I also pray that as we engage in the process of electing a new president this year, that our discussion and debates may be civil, and that our words may reflect the moral values that are the foundation of our great country. We thank you for hearing us. We ask all this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. And before we get to the report, I would like to thank the members of the Mark Keppel Student Body Council for coming forward. And we have small tokens of the Glendale City Council's appreciation. So will my council members please join me? We have gift bags for you, and they are right here.
Wow.
What's that?
Oh, 5.
Mr. Vice President. Activities Director. There you go.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Give me some of the kids
This is
over
what
there.
it looks like. You can have that. There's one in there. Let's give one to the
Advisor.
advisor. And is there one extra one? Yes. There's a group of supporters who, even though it's and there we go. Thank you very much. Well, that's our feel-good moment for the evening. Let's hope things don't go downhill too quickly. Mr. Clerk, may we have your report?
Certainly, the agenda for the March 1st, 2016 regular meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Friday, February 26, 2016 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
Thank you. Next item.
Next item is presentation and appointments. At 3A is agenda preview for the meetings of Tuesday, March 8th, 2016.
Ms. Beers.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, our March 8th and 15th Housing Authority and City Council meetings have been canceled. Our next meeting will be scheduled for March 22nd. So the next two meetings will be canceled. Our next regular meetings will be scheduled for March 22nd.
Do you have a question?
Last week, didn't you appoint someone to Historic Preservation Commission?
I did, but due to the lateness of the hour and the diminished brain cells that I think we were all experiencing, that is not going to be set for the 22nd. It will be on the 22nd.
Do they have a meeting before then?
I am not sure,
Okay.
but thank you for pointing that out. I hope to have your vote, and I vote when it
I
comes
was
before.
looking forward to it.
Okay. Okay, so were you completed, Ms. Beers?
Yes, Mr.
With
Mayor,
that,
thank
okay,
you.
so March 22nd, what are we going to do for 2 weeks without the Glendale City Council? Next item, please.
Next item is presentation for the GMA Manager of the Year. That's the Glendale Management Association.
Well, will a member of the Glendale Management
It's taken
Association...
off calendar. So the next item is a proclamation for March for Meals.
Okay. March for Meals. I have a proclamation, but would you please introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the great program?
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and audience. My name is Olga Guevara, and I'm a senior who has participated and volunteered both at the Adult Recreation Center and Pacific Community Center. I am proud to accept the March for Meal proclamation for all the seniors that enjoy lunch at the senior program. The City of Glendale has helped many of us receive good nutrition and a place to have social time. This opportunity to enjoy a hot meal, social time, have friends to talk to, help many seniors who feel isolated in their homes to get out and be part of the community. Thank you for allowing us to have the senior nutrition program as a safety net for many who would go hungry or stay alone without it at home.
Well, thank you very much. Any other presentations or introductions? I do have a proclamation, and it reads as follows. Whereas on March 22, 1972, President Richard M. Nixon signed into law a measure that established a national nutrition program for seniors 60 years and older. And whereas the City of Glendale recognizes this historic month and the importance of both congregate and home-delivered meals to raise awareness about the escalating problem of senior hunger in America. And whereas the 2016 observance of March for Meals provides an opportunity to support elderly nutrition programs that deliver vital and critical services by donating, volunteering, and raising awareness about senior hunger and isolation. And whereas elderly nutrition programs in the City of Glendale provide over 52,000 nutritious meals to seniors that help them maintain their health and independence, thereby preventing unnecessary falls, hospitalizations, and or premature institutionalization, and provide a powerful socialization opportunity for hundreds of seniors to help combat loneliness and isolation. And now, therefore, I, R. Najarian, Mayor of Glendale, do hereby proclaim March 2016 as March for Meals Month and urge every citizen to take this month to honor our elderly nutrition programs and the seniors they serve. Our recognition of and involvement in the National 2016 March for Meals can enrich our entire community and help combat senior hunger and isolation in America. Proud to present it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next item, please.
Next item is the consent calendar, including minutes following a routine and may be acted upon by one motion. A member of the council or the audience requesting separate consideration may do so by making such request before a motion is proposed.
I have several requests to pull item 4E. So that item will be pulled. Are there any other requests from council?
4G, please.
4G. Any other requests? So we have 4A, B, C, D, and F to be moved.
I'll move those items.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Council members Devine,
Yes.
Friedman,
Yes.
Garpetian,
Yes.
Sinanian. Yes. Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Please read 4E.
4E is Director of Public Works regarding Safe Routes to School Improvement Project Phase 3. E1 is a resolution adopting the plan and specifications for a Safe Routes to School Improvements Project Phase 3, specification number 3586, plans number 13023, and directing the city clerk to advertise for bids.
Okay, what I would suggest is that we hear from the public and then we can devote Mr. Galanyan to respond to the particular concerns that are raised. So, I have 4 cards. The first is Paul Pagnone, followed by Eugene Ridnour.
Good evening, Council. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us. I'm a local property owner here in Glendale and business owner, and I'm familiar with the neighborhood in which this proposed sidewalk widening is happening. It's over off of Victory Western, and specifically the property I'm talking about is on Justin. It's a neighborhood of no sidewalks, and I understand the goal of the Safe Sidewalks program. However, I'm not quite sure that it's going to work in the way that people are thinking, and I think there's going to be a pretty big impact to a few of the residents from actually installing sidewalks, since it's going to be cutting portions of their property off. So I just ask that the council and staff look at maybe a way to minimize the impact to the local residents on this project. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Eugene Ridnour, followed by David Akers.
Hi, welcome. My name is Eugene Ridnour. I'm a homeowner at 333 Justin Avenue. I happen to be one of the particular homeowners directly impacted by this project. While I completely understand the needs to improve safe routes to schools for children, this particular project seems to specifically impact my home directly by adding a sidewalk on my lawn and turn all the way to Victory Boulevard. I think there's some other suggestions that can be adopted that may be able to alleviate this problem. It seems as though a widening of the Winchester Avenue block will be occurring to encourage drop-off on that side. I don't see that occurring on the Justin side of the block where the new school was built. I think that would be an ideal spot to add an additional drop-off zone, which would help alleviate the drop-off concerns. Most of the students that attend this school actually do not live in the neighborhood. There are really no one who walks to schools per se. They are driven to school and accompanied by their parents to the classrooms directly. I would encourage everyone to reconsider this specific sidewalk project and look to other options. As I mentioned, the drop-off zone on Justin. Thank you.
That's a good question.
Thank you. Why don't we go of him in particular? Yes. Mr. Ridnour, you have a question.
Could you please explain to me one more time what is the impact on your property with the sidewalk improvement?
There currently are no sidewalks in the neighborhood whatsoever, so I will now have a sidewalk directly on my property, of which this neighborhood has never had one. The charm and beauty of the neighborhood exists without sidewalks. It will now possibly incur liability concerns of people on my property. Of course, sidewalk does exist with the city rights, but you encourage people on a sidewalk to then walk on your property, I may potentially have some liability issues, casualty concerns of insurance problems that don't have now. Other concerns are just the overall impact directly to us, where it really solves a minor issue that can be addressed, as I said, with this drop-off zone.
So there is no sidewalk right now, but the city has an easement to put a sidewalk in there.
That is correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
And where are you suggesting that they go?
Well, in terms of the drop-off zone on the actual, if you look at the map here, if you have the map on this part of your, okay, you have it. There's a green line on the Justin Avenue side. There isn't a drop-off zone there, and that's a very wide portion of the block. That would be an ideal zone or an ideal street to add for the drop-off zone. I don't know that that's been looked at specifically.
And what about pedestrians walking down the street?
I live in the community. I've never seen pedestrians walk down the street per se. They walk in the streets because time's up.
No, I mean, go ahead and answer.
People walk on the street. That's kind of the charm of the neighborhood. There isn't any traffic in the neighborhood until from 7:50 a.m. to 8 a.m. during the drop-off, and maybe in the afternoon around 3 for pickup. It's a very short amount of time.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure thing.
David Akers, followed by Rod Rodriguez.
Good evening. I'd like to reiterate what both gentlemen said, but I think Eugene might have left out that the sidewalk will also take away from the driveways on that side of the street until where they won't be able to park in their driveway. The driveways aren't deep enough without blocking the sidewalk. And we do have, I don't know of any accidents we've had in the neighborhood by pedestrians being hit by automobiles, but we have four-way parking on each corner of the school. Four-way stop on each corner of the school. And as was said, the most traffic we get during the day is in the morning, and then when school lets out, we don't have any cross traffic or to speak of coming through the neighborhood. And without the sidewalks, that's the way the neighborhood has been in all these years, and we haven't had any problems as of yet. And I think I just, other than that, reiterate on what the gentleman said before me. Thank you.
And your house is on Winchester or is on Justin?
I live directly across from Eugene.
Justin.
I'm on Justin.
Justin. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Rod Rodriguez.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for your time this evening. Really, I'm just here to reiterate what the people have spoke to prior to myself, and I just wanted to add that, frankly, I wasn't informed of this meeting that's obviously impacting me. I'm a longtime proud resident of Glendale. I live at 325 Justin Avenue, which is one of the three homes that I suppose is being weighed as being impacted with this sidewalk. I also want to point out that nobody else in Riverside Rancho has sidewalks currently, and for all the time I've been there, there's been no issues. And I've talked to some of the parents at this school. I understand it's a great school that the city is proud of, and they should be, but the people I've spoken to, the parents were from West Hollywood, and I don't understand how we're making considerations for not the constituents of Glendale, but people from out of town. And the issue that is being in play here can be easily remedied by the drop-off points that Eugene mentioned on either Winchester or Justin. And as David Akers mentioned, there hasn't been an issue. I know David's been there probably 3 or 4 decades now. I've been there quite a bit as well. Obviously, for the 3 homes that are being considered to be impacted, it would be a tremendous, property value loss. And I know for myself, me making my decision on purchasing the home, which was the biggest investment I've made in my life, and my plans to live in Riverside Rancho in Glendale were based on the charm and the curb appeal. And frankly, that area, there's no major streets that run through that area. So as I think Eugene pointed out, for the few minutes prior to drop off and pickup, there's really a bunch of dog walkers and pedestrians that enjoy the neighborhood, frankly. And it's really close to where the famous Glendale Halloween house is, to give it some context. So I also, once again, want to reiterate that nobody, informed me of this meeting other than my neighbors, nobody from the city. So I just kind of question that a little bit, but I hope you would consider the tremendous negative impact that it would have on the homes that are actually being impacted by this decision, which I think can be addressed by simply having the drop-off points and pickup points that many schools utilize already. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Ochoa, may we ask Mr. Galanyan to comment and, I guess, address the plan, the location, the design of, and this is apparently the only location that we're hearing from. There's four others throughout the city, but tell us a little bit about this.
Of course, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, the item before you is to adopt the plans and specs for physical improvements. This is above and beyond the education and enforcement, the non-infrastructure work that we plan to do starting August of 2016. This will be for physical improvements around 5 schools, Franklin Elementary School being one of them. And we had engaged a consultant to work with us to identify the deficiencies and to come up with improvements that would best serve the safety of the students at all of these 5 schools, but primarily the subject here is Franklin Elementary. We have been working with the residents along Justin Avenue for months. We have been collaborating with them, looked at alternatives to minimize so-called impact. The best solution that we have come up with is the installation of sidewalks on one side of the street on Justin Avenue, which will provide connectivity to an existing sidewalk for ADA requirement and guidelines requires it. All of this work will be done within the public right-of-way. There will be no impact to front lawn or private lawns or private property. Along that stretch of Justin, we have 16 foot of public right-of-way from the curb. The sidewalk that we're proposing to install is only 5 to 6 foot wide. Again, all work will be done within the public right-of-way. We will need right of entry permits from the 3 residences along Justin so that we can provide a smooth transition on the driveways to their garages or to their properties. If we interfere or remove any landscaping, even within the public right-of-way and not on private property, to the best of our abilities, we'll restore them to its original condition. I think, and I've had one of our students monitor the drop-off and pickup of students around the vicinity of the school, and there are parents who drop off their kids on Justin Avenue and walk them in the street to take them to the school because of the length of the queuing of the vehicles in front of elementary school in Winchester. It backs up all the way to Justin. So there isn't sufficient capacity to add any more queuing lane on Winchester, and hence the parents drop them off on Justin, where we're proposing to install the sidewalks. This will just provide an area for them to walk safely and be out of the vehicular traffic. As I said, we have been working with the residents for months. We had informed them what the process is, and this will go to council. It's my understanding that because of the funding issues, we almost pulled this item. We called the residents, and then we called them back and said, no, it's back on again. What else? The driveways, yes, a couple of them are not deep enough, but as it stands currently, the vehicles that are parked on driveways do encroach into the public right-of-way. So that's not going to change. It's not going to improve the matter, but it's not going to make it worse.
So let's just talk about the vehicles in the driveway, that if you do then block a sidewalk, that's going to be subject to citation.
Right. You're absolutely right, Mr. Mayor. As I mentioned, Parking in the public right-of-way is also subject to citation by neighborhood services. There is parking available on street, and some of these garages are legal non-conforming. They've been there since the 30s and 40s. And we will look at ways of maybe bumping out the driveway aprons to provide a deeper length of driveway. We'll see how that works with our drainage and parking. But that's always been the case. That's the case currently.
Have you had specific discussions with these residents on Justin?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, several times.
And
not I personally, my staff have.
Yes. Have you been able to address some of those concerns to modify, or as you said, one example is to bump out the driveway. Are any of those concerns addressable, or is it? I mean, this is the problem.
Right.
This is the problem. We're trying to create a safe route to school, as the funding implies. And we hear that it is a necessity. Has the PTA and school board and traffic police department confirmed that this is a situation where there's potential for, well, let's talk about it, potential for liability. Now that if something does happen, and this was put before the council, that puts us in a bad situation, doesn't it?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, as I mentioned earlier, we had retained the services of a qualified consultant to do this work. This is basically what he does, and he has identified the deficiency, this being one of them. This is not the first time, as you and the council know, that we have implemented Safe Route to School physical infrastructure improvements around school. This is probably our third or fourth phase that the consultant had recommended. And as you noted, and as I had asked the staff to monitor it over a 2-day period, they did see parents dropping off kids. They did notice. They took pictures of parents walking their kids in vehicular traffic lanes and taking them to the school.
On Justin.
On Justin.
So do we have, can we get on the internet and put this map on so we can, is that possible?
We have an exhibit that Mr. Kasakian can put up.
How many houses are on Justin that are being impacted?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Devine, there'll be 3 houses fronting the sidewalk and the public right-of-way.
I know we have a map.
It's coming up right now.
But we're looking for actual photos or street views, I think.
The city clerk, we also have a... Mr. Mayor, Mayor City Council, this is a rather large exhibit that shows the proposed sidewalk. Again, in the public right-of-way, you see the green line is the property line. The magenta is a cross gutter. It's really not related to the sidewalks.
So where it gets to the driveway, you're going to give them a curb cut?
Councilman Garpetian, they already have a driveway apron.
They have the apron, so you're just going to continue. You're not going to put a sidewalk on their apron so they can get in their driveway.
Councilman Garpetian, there's a ADA requirement dictates to have a continuous path of travel uninterrupted. So there'll be an apron, a sidewalk, and then the driveway. But it'll still be navigable the cars can navigate over it.
Okay, so when I see those cars on the top of that screen, even if you build a sidewalk, you're not going to... The sidewalk is not encroaching into where the car is right now, so they will have still enough room to park and not be on the sidewalk. Am I correct, or my eyes are deceiving me?
That is correct. Generally, Councilmember Garpetian, there may be a few inches of the back of the car, depending on the length of the car, that may stick out into the sidewalk behind the apron.
And out of those 3 homes, how many of them are in the same situation? How many garages are built like this? They're all built the same way?
Not along the same line. One of them is worse than the other two. By that I mean the driveway is shorter than the other
street,
two.
basically.
Yes.
They have a garage that they can park in that one?
Yes, Councilmember Friedman. We have a picture,
want the
Mr. City
photos?
Clerk. Yes.
Look, you said we have 16 feet of easement?
Right away.
It's actually public right-of-way.
Not easement, it's right away.
Public right-of-way. So
Rick,
if
one of the ones you want to show?
Oh yeah, this is a good example. This is an old picture. That fence has been changed. Next picture, please. So this is where the sidewalk is going to go. Right. So there's absolutely no place to walk. All of these landscaping are planted within the public right-of-way. Next photo, please. This is a good depiction of what it looks like today. So this driveway does not have the standard apron and the sidewalk and then the driveway.
They do have a garage on the other side,
They do have a garage, Councilmember Friedman.
as they required to, right, by code.
Yes, Councilmember Friedman.
But it's certainly, it's tight.
can you go back to the first slide, please? No, the very first one that has a top view. The map.
Bird's eye view.
Right. Okay. That green line is the line of the sidewalk?
Yes. So that green line, Councilmember Garpetian, is the property line delineating the public right-of-way.
Got it. So that's it.
The teal color is the sidewalk, proposed sidewalk.
Yes, Councilmember Devine.
Is there any kind of ADA requirement about having a sidewalk at all? I mean, does ADA sort of give you that option?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Friedman, the ADA guidelines mandate installation of sidewalks every time a city or a municipality performs an infrastructure improvement in the neighborhood. So if we're doing street paving and there are no ADA compatible, the latest standards, we are mandated to bring them up to the latest standards.
So when's the last time this was paved, and why wasn't this done then, just out of curiosity?
Councilmember Friedman, I don't have that information. The reason it hasn't been paved recently is because the pavement is in fairly good condition
But
compared.
if we were to go in, let's say, and do any kind of infrastructure work, like you said, would our policy be to try to put sidewalks in at that point?
Councilmember Friedman, that would be a mandate by the state, actually.
So, well, have there been improvements at the school that would have triggered that?
That's a different entity that mandates it, but they do require continuous
Tell me
path.
again where the school is compared to this. I'm a little bit lost.
It's at the corner of Winchester and.
on this from this photo.
We'll have to drag it down.
You can maybe pull it down a little so we can see how far away it is.
One more.
Well, you're going southbound, aren't you?
It's right there.
Yes.
It's 2 blocks.
Oh, nice.
So if someone was living up the block and they wanted to walk to school, they would walk down Justin.
On the street.
Walk in the street.
Can I see the map again?
So then, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Then are we in essence cutting into their lawns, their yards, or is that public property that we're going to be putting the sidewalks on, or
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Devine,
sloped?
all the improvements will be within the public right-of-way.
That's not there.
Mr. Mayor, seeing as this is a request to approve bids and specs to go out to bid but not award a contract, if we wanted to move forward with this item tonight, knowing it still has to come back to you for approval, that would give council members the opportunity to go drive the neighborhood if you wanted to, and allow Mr. Galanian to speak to the residents once again without fear of something happening at this point, because this is only bids and specs.
I was going to suggest that. Okay. That was a very good idea. Ms. Friedman?
I was going to say I would really like to be able to go and drive it. It didn't occur to me usually when things are on consent like this, and I don't think we've ever, with the Safe Routes to School project, had neighbors come in with a concern about what we were doing. And looking at the photos that we saw, we can certainly understand it because it's an older neighborhood, it's really tight, the houses are very close to the street, and even when they're not, over the years, people have put fences close to the street, which I didn't even think we were allowed to do, but no, we're not. Not legal fences, but there are fences the previous people must have put in. So, that's there, and it definitely is a big change to what you're used to. On the other hand, you've got a school a block and a half, 2 blocks away, and kids potentially walking down the street, and you've got one of the people who spoke mentioned that there were pedestrians and dog walkers walking down the street, which makes me very concerned for their safety, even though nothing's happened yet, and hopefully nothing will. So I think you're seeing a group of people struggling with making sure that kids are safe versus understanding neighbors' concerns to retain the kind of streetscape they've had. So let us go take a look, but just understand that I think everyone's heard you, but we also have a safety concern we have to think about. So it's not that easy of a thing, okay? But we'll take the time to go and look, I think all of us.
Okay, so you have instruction upon passing to, again, meet with the residents and maybe go through some of the issues, the location and all that. And then it's going to come back to us in a month or so, a couple months after the bids are put in.
Mr. Mayor, typically we advertise for 4 weeks, and then there's a 3-week advance notice to go on the agenda, so 7 to 8 weeks.
At least a couple months. Okay then, so members of the public that came, we're going to reach out and we're just going to maybe do our own inspection and see what we think about the issues here. So is there a motion then for 4E?
So moved.
For the second.
Yes. Roll call, please.
Council members Devine?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Garpetian?
Yes.
Sinanian?
Yes.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. 4G, please.
4G is City Attorney regarding revision to City Council meeting schedule for 2015-16. G1 is a motion revising 2015-16 fiscal year regular council meeting schedule.
Okay, Mr. Garpetian.
Yes, I would like the city manager or city attorney to explain to public why some of our meetings are being canceled. I'm being asked out there, why are you canceling this meeting? Why are you canceling so many meetings? And I explained to them one by one, but it's really difficult to explain to 200,000 people as to why. Just if you briefly explain to people why are some of these meetings being canceled.
Sure, and Mr. Cho can elaborate. But when we start the beginning of the year, we set a calendar for the council, setting some dates that we're going to be dark based on what we know about council calendars, what we know about holidays, what we know, Christmas holidays. So we were intended for this fiscal year. We were intended to be dark on. We were supposed to be dark on the 22nd and 29th, but due to council calendar conflicts and some other conflicts, we're proposing to switch those dates to be dark on March 8th and March 15th. Also April 18th. April 19th, and then we were already supposed to be dark on May 31st. Which is the Tuesday after Memorial Day, which we typically have been dark on those Tuesdays after Monday holidays. And then in addition, it's proposed that we be dark on June 21st and June 28th, which will be after the budget's adopted and is in line with council members' calendars.
And the idea that the school district now has moved up its vacation schedule. So they start earlier in the summer, they end earlier in the late spring. And so to the extent that it lines up again, the council calendar, staff calendars, everyone else's calendars, summer just got a little bit early, that's all. But the budget's adopted by the 14th, as Mr. Garcia indicates.
Thank you. And for next week, 3 of us are out on a conference, and that's one of the reasons that meeting was canceled.
So it would be March 8th and March 15th. Right. That should be the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Will you move 4G then?
Yes, I'll move.
I'll second it.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Council members Devine?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Garpetian?
Yes.
Sinanian?
Yes.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. Let's move on to the next item.
Next item is City Council and staff comments.
Okay. Let's start
Okay.
from my left, and
Thank
I'll
you.
follow around the horn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Divine.
Thank you. Just a couple. Today, we all attended the Glendale Beautiful Arbor Day event. Over 70 trees were dedicated today to be planted all over the city. It was quite a wonderful event, and kudos to Glendale Beautiful and to Jess Duran and his parks staff. I also attended the a successful Glendale Latino Association Awards Luncheon. They raised money for scholarships for our youth, and it was very successful this year. There were some great honorees, Judy Kendall and Carl Povolitis, who's here tonight, and the Downtown Business Association. So congrats to the Latino Association for doing a good job at raising funds for scholarships. That's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Carpeccia?
Due to my not feeling very well tonight, I'm going to pass, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Sinania?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Friday, I attended the 107th Glendale High School Oratorical, which is, if not one of the most, it's one of the most old traditions in Glendale school system. And it was actually very interesting, very impressive. I highly encourage everyone to, if they have the opportunity to attend it next year. I think each of the high schools has its own version of it. And it was very heartwarming to see our kids be so organized and disciplined and carry their school spirit with such pride. I also want to talk about the tech program that we approved last week. It was my impression that, well, I think that was, in fact, we voted to have the entity, the company that got the contract to come up with the roadmap for the city of Glendale to organize an ad hoc community group, an ad hoc committee that would sort of give them the Glendale guidance, the guidance as to how their program should be geared towards Glendale. And since this plan and this program has been so dear to my heart and so close to it, I would like to ask my colleagues to designate me as the council liaison to this ad hoc group and the entity that's...
Sure.
Okay.
Good idea.
Thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Friedman?
Nothing this week.
Okay. I just have a short one. We have the Mayor's Prayer Breakfast next Thursday. Do we have a graphic for that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so it will be early in the morning. Doors open at 6 a.m. And the keynote speaker will be Mr. Jim Fox, if I'm not mistaken, who is the voice. He's the voice of the Kings.
Yes, he is, and he's also a Hall of Famer King player himself, as our viewers from at home can see from the photo on the flyer. Tickets are available by calling 626-720-1088 for information. They may also be purchased in advance at the Montrose Verdugo City Chamber of Commerce or through GlendaleArts.org.
Okay. Hope to see you all there. A hearty breakfast will be served. Thank you. Let's see if staff has any comments.
No, sir.
No, sir? No one? Okay. Let's move on.
Next item is community event announcements. This is reserved for 3-minute community event announcements.
Okay. I have a card from Ms. Biesmeyer.
I'll actually bring it back up.
I'll wait until my program is up. But good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. As you know, I represent the Glendale Youth Orchestra for the last 15 years. I've been on the board. My children are grown. And so, but this is a project deep in my heart. And so I just want you to know this is our 27th season. And this Sunday, March 6th, we will be having our second concert of the season at the Alex Theater at 7 p.m. And I try to reiterate to people that parking is $1 validated at the Orange Street garage. And so I just wanted you to know know that, if any of you saw the halftime show of the Super Bowl, you could see how talented all these young musicians are. And this is what our kids do too. And they stand and they play. And so it's very dynamic. And our, conductor is very dynamic and works well with these children. Well, they don't consider themselves children, but still. And so we have 3 young musicians that will be doing solo performances. And so, their names are on our form. But Jacqueline Ching will be playing piano. Rachel Mugamanaro will be our violinist, and Josephine Lee is playing flute. And so we just want you all to know and try to come to our concert, and that you can go online or Facebook to look at our website just to see. And you can also get discounted tickets by using our logo number. And so we are also having a fundraiser for the month of March for, the Glendale Youth Orchestra, and that we help support young musicians throughout the city, and especially with our own, because we have a scholarship program, because it's so expensive trying to learn to play music or to play. So we are just, trying to get you all to donate and come. And our last concert of the season is May 8th, Sunday, at the Alex Theater. And so we just want to make music available to all the students in Glendale. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't have any other cards, so we will close this portion of oral communications, and let's move to the next item.
Next item is adoption of ordinances. 7A is adding Chapter 2.110 to the Glendale Municipal Code regarding reward for hit and run crimes and other serious crimes.
Thank you. We discussed this last meeting.
I'd like to move the ordinance.
Someone like to move it?
I would like to.
Fine. And Mr. Sinanian? Any comments, Mr. Ochoa?
No, sir. We'll be submitting.
Need to clarify any?
We would just be submitting to you at a later date the marketing rollout plan that you had requested. So we'll bring that back.
I don't have any cards. Roll call, please.
Council members Devine?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Garpetian?
Yes.
Sinanian?
Yes.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. Next item.
Item 8, under action items, 8A is city manager and city attorney regarding supplemental report regarding fiscal and service impacts associated with potential repeal of utility users tax, comparative analysis on law enforcement and fire protection services. A1 is a motion to note and file.
Mr. Ochoa.
Yes, sir. We have a comprehensive report, and we're going to start off with our city auditor, Eileen Donahue, who is going to talk about the methodology that we used by way of introducing as best we can, a side-by-side comparison. Why would we do a side-by-side comparison of police and fire services? As you know, in June, we are going to have a ballot measure. We believe it will be Measure N. But that has to be confirmed by the County of Los Angeles, that will ask Glendale voters, do they wish to repeal the longstanding utility user tax that's been in place since 1969 and serves as the city's 4th largest general fund revenue source, repeal a portion of that on the water, gas, and electric consumption, as opposed to the entire amount, which would also be on telecom. The net result, if the repeal is successful, is a reduction of about $17.5 million in the estimated by the current fiscal year, and probably north of $18 million in the coming fiscal year based on our revenue projections. If that were to come to pass, then we would be talking about, at the conclusion of the recession, not the beginning of the Great Recession, but at the conclusion, after significant cuts have already been made, how would we cut another $17.5 million, yet still try to deliver exceptional customer service to our residents and our businesses? What we've showed you previously, and as kind of a precursor to this particular report, is really you would have 3 options. You could effectively cripple all of the general fund departments to the 2 largest departments in the general fund being police and fire, as well as parks, libraries, a portion of public works, community development, all of our internal services, to the tune of about 10% reduction just across the board. Obviously, that hits the larger departments more. You could eliminate in its entirety the Department of Community Services and Parks and the Library, Arts, and Culture Department. I'm not talking about contracting out. I'm talking about outright elimination. Between those two departments, you have about $17 million worth of general fund funding. Or you could look at the two largest departments in the general fund, which would be police and fire, which make up a little over almost two-thirds of the general fund appropriations, and try to find a way to contract out those services. That seems like that would be the most expeditious way to move forward. But before we give you any advice, and as a supplemental report in terms of the impacts on the UUT, we had internal audit walk through what a side-by-side comparison would look like. Because it's one thing to say that you should contract out, but it's another thing to understand what the costs are and what the ultimate impacts on service levels would be. So tonight what we have for you is a discussion and overview of the public safety aspect of contracting out. We'll come back to you at a subsequent meeting on a discussion regarding the elimination of CSP and library arts culture, all leading up to our budget process where we will present to you two budgets, one that continues to have the utility user tax and or the large portion of utility user tax on gas, water, and electric, and one that eliminates it. Now, it's worth noting that in 2009, over two-thirds of our voters voted to affirm the utility user tax. A mere 7 years later, we're asking the voters, did they have second thoughts? This is a matter that was brought forward under Prop 218 by a handful of residents and not something that the city is obviously asking, because as you look at the level of service and you look at the degree of satisfaction that our residents and businesses have with our services, no one would seemingly be asking to eviscerate the service levels that people have come to rely on. So with that as a preamble, let me just have Eileen talk very briefly about the methodology that she used and her auditors used, because it really was a yeoman's job to go through and in a relatively short amount of time compile all this information, and then I'll walk you through much of the information that you have before you.
Let me interrupt you, Mr. Ochoa. Folks at home, we just had two firefighters who got an emergency call who had to leave. Chief, does that involve you at all? Do you need to attend to that in any way? Okay, feel free. If the emergency comes in, City Council can wait. I think, the work you do is much more important. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. My name is Eileen Donahue. I work in the position of Internal Audit Manager at the Department of Finance. As a background, Internal Audit was requested to research law enforcement and fire protection services provided by Los Angeles County to develop a report with comparative analyses. The purpose was to gather information to develop an objective comparison between Glendale Police Department and Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. We are asked to focus on 5 contract cities: Carson, Compton, Lancaster, Palmdale, and Santa Clarita. In addition, we are asked to do an objective comparison between the Glendale Fire Department and the Los Angeles County Fire Department. And we are asked to focus on 3 incorporated cities of El Monte, Pomona, and Santa Clarita. In addition, while we are performing the work, we are also asked to obtain objective data on law enforcement for neighboring communities such as Burbank, Pasadena, and Santa Monica. The methodology we applied to perform this research, we conducted extensive research. We're auditors. We gathered information on law enforcement services, fire protection services, municipal contracting. We also made inquiries and public information requests to the cities in the county that we were looking at. We reviewed the County Board of Supervisors. We reviewed for any reports associated with fire and policing activities. We contacted Los Angeles County and obtained the current contract rates for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and also the fee-for-service rates for the Los Angeles County Fire Department. We held discussions internally with our own Glendale Police Department and Glendale Fire Department so we could fully understand what went on in a policing activity and a fire municipal activity. We also searched the public domain, and we did inquiries to obtain demographic data, financial information, budget information, crime statistics, fire response data, and any other type of information we could obtain to develop these comparative analyses. The result of our work was a report with many comparative analyses. It took the effort of 3 internal auditors, myself, and 2 senior internal auditors that are with me, Jesse Jong and Natalie Manomi Valdivia. I'd also like to add that the work that we did is a product, it's an informational purpose product, it's not an audit report. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ochoa so that he can continue on and describe the information in our report.
All right, so with that being said, I can tell you that understanding kind of where you are is understanding who else is doing that business and providing that service. So as Eileen had stated, we looked at other independent cities that are roughly equivalent in size and budget, that have their own independent police departments, because we first went into the police realm. I will tell you that in Los Angeles County, you'll find relatively more independent police agencies than you will fire agencies. It's more common to be contracted with the County of Los Angeles for fire services as opposed to police. So here you have a comparison of Burbank, Pasadena, Santa Monica, and Glendale. You see in the blue bar there the general fund budgets for these respective cities, and you see what the per capita cost is in the greenish looking line there, and then the household in the greenish line, and the per capita in red. And I think what you're taking away here is that Glendale is actually paying less per capita, less per household than other comparable cities. And that's important when you consider the activity levels that you'll see in just a bit, because I think you're getting great value for those police officers and the non-sworn support staff that work in the department. Here in blue, you see the number of sworn police personnel and the non-sworn personnel in red, and then matched against what the general fund budget is. So again, what you're seeing is roughly comparable levels of police services, but I think the real takeaway is the relatively low level of support services. What you'll find in police departments, much more even than fire departments, is that the tooth-to-tail ratio, the support that is necessary to keep a patrol force, an investigative services force out in the field is substantial. But in Glendale, we generally do it with fewer support folks than in other neighboring agencies. Here we see ratios in terms of sworn personnel per 1,000 residents. And so what you see, the takeaway from most independent cities is a ratio of more than 1 officer. In Glendale, it's 1.2 officers per 1,000 residents. This will be important as you look at the comparables with the County of Los Angeles. There you see Santa Monica with a relatively smaller population, but with the highest amount of sworn personnel per 1,000. Here you see Part 1 crimes clearance. The upper line, the blue is the violent crimes, the red is the property crimes. The dotted line along the top is the violent crime clearance rate, and along the bottom is the property crime clearance rate. You see a lot of comparability along those two lines, a little bit not as strong on the violent crime, much stronger on the property crime, and I think this is an indication of the type of crime, violent crime, when we do get it, which isn't very often, but when we do in Glendale, it's much more of a nature that is less predictable and less owing to, for example, gangs, for the types of predictive crimes that you'll see, violent crimes, in perhaps other agencies, other communities. When something unfortunate happens here in town, usually it's a one-off that doesn't really have much of a precedent because it is a safe environment. Yes, sir.
Would you crimes clearance rate? Would you explain what that is?
So when we have a crime that is solved, when it gets through, we understand there's been an arrest made and the case is closed. And it's interesting. It's a great question because how an agency documents its clearance rate is important. Some agencies, larger agencies in particular, will clear crimes if there is an MO for a crime. Let's say there's a number of assaults, robbery and assaults. They all fit the same MO. Let's say one person or one group of folks is arrested and convicted. Some agencies, not Glendale, but some agencies will then clear all of those cases, even the ones that weren't directly solved, but they match the same MO. They'll count that towards their clearance rate for violent crimes. We don't do that. We look at each crime. We do look at trends, and we do look at activity levels. But we utilize predictive policing. But at the same time, we try to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. So we're looking to see each crime that is a report is taken. We try to find closure for it, an arrest and a conviction.
Thank you.
In terms of the Part 1 crimes, you see that all that being said, Glendale, on a 5-year average, is considerably less by way of Part 1 crimes. Part 1 crimes being the more serious crimes, rape, robbery, homicide. In the largest city of these 4 comparable cities, surrounded by the evil empire of Los Angeles on 3 sides, not having any moats or drawbridges or walls, we are still able to keep this community extraordinarily safe, such that we are one of the top 10 safest mid-sized cities in the state and top 15 in the nation. In terms of misdemeanor and felony arrests, I mentioned to you activity levels are very important. Here you see that we have a number of felony arrests, a higher number. Santa Monica has a higher number there in red of misdemeanor arrests. But I think this is speaking back to the amount of activity that we have, and you see it there with respect to the number of officers that's plotted along the line across the top. This is one that will come back as we go through the county comparisons. This is activity levels. Along the blue line, you see that these are the service calls, and then the observations in red, and the reports taken in that greenish color. And so the thing that is most important here, if you ask me what keeps Glendale safe, certainly it's collaboration with our residents and businesses, but it is the proactive policing that you see manifest in those observations. Just this past Sunday, a Be on the Lookout bulletin was put out to officers. Officers on the street recognized the person and his car from the bulletin in the southwest part of town, made contact. Of course, the person in question, the suspect, recognizing that he was identified, took off, ended up leading to a chase, crashed his car, taken into custody. Not a good person, not somebody that we want in our community, but were it not for a vigilant police officer keeping an eye on the information that comes out and initiating an investigation on his own at his own discretion, on his own behalf, we don't make that arrest. And that is just one of literally scores of incidences where we have very proactive police at all levels of the organization that are paying attention to the small details and making sure that little crimes stay little and big crimes don't occur.
So,
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Ochoa, so then the observations are incidences where the police see something, not necessarily are sent to that spot or that area. They just see something.
That's correct. Self-initiated.
So, and this has a big impact on our community. And
it has perhaps the largest impact in terms of our patrol operations, yes.
And we have the highest number of those of any of the cities.
By far, if you look at those other agencies. So that is officers hustling and trying to make sure that they have a connection to their areas in which they work.
Thank you.
So, in summary, on the independent cities comparison, you can see that our police department is trim and efficient. Fewer sworn and non-sworn personnel, despite having comparable budget strength. We are able generally to do more with less. We are very effective in our arrest rates, clearance rates, operational activities with comparable or better rates in each one of those, comparable to the other independent agencies or exceeding what they're doing. And the outcomes are better. Namely, we are a safer community for it. So that being the baseline that we're working from, because we are an independent city, we have this long history and tradition of effective law enforcement. We said, okay, if worse came to worse, if the residents of the voters of Glendale said, no, I'm not going to fund this tax that's been in place since 1969 that is effectively $7 per person per month, so a household of 4 people, rounded up, call it $30 a month. I'm not going to pay that anymore. I've been paying it, not going to pay it anymore. Go ahead and contract out. What does the world look like if you were to contract out? And I would submit to you that it doesn't necessarily paint a pretty picture. legislature. And let me preface that both in terms of discussions about county sheriffs and county fire. They are tremendous partners for us, and this is by no means a denigration of the work that they do. It's simply a reflection of the business model that they use and the way that they do policing and fire protection and the way that we do it. And the expectation, the degree of comfort that our residents take from that level of the expectation that they have, and it's reflected in the pride and the service level that's yielded. Here, just a real quick comparison. You'll see that in Glendale, as a fully functioning department, you have a number of lines of business, not just in the sworn field, but in the non-sworn area as well. In patrol, you're able to take an officer, and it's not uncommon that we keep officers and non-sworn personnel for their entire career. There's a residual benefit in that those officers are able to make the kinds of connections with the community, so they know family histories, they know the history of properties, they know so many things about this community, what happens when we all go to sleep, that it translates into better service. By contrast, in a much larger environment like the areas patrolled by county sheriffs, you have much more portability, that the officers do rotate over a period of years. But generally speaking, they provide police services, public safety services. We provide the same. But when you see a contract city, you're seeing the contracting for effectively patrol services, some degree of auxiliary services, as you see listed there, but everything more or less beyond your initial contract on an a la carte menu. You can buy more police service, but it's going to cost you a little bit more. So it is a different strategy by way of the county being a regional agency, not being directly focused on any one of their cities. And their strength is that when something very bad happens, they can roll lots of different resources to that particular hotspot. But overall, they aren't focusing all of those resources on this one geographic area. Their strength lies in their size. And so you see the comparison cities, Carson, Compton, Lancaster, Palmdale, Santa Clarita, and then Glendale. I think the takeaway here is that Carson, Lancaster, Palmdale, and Glendale are all relatively new cities. And these cities incorporated certainly from the 1960s on would seem to indicate that they reflect the high cost of operating an independent, starting up an independent police agency. If you're going to have a police agency, you're going to generally have a jail. You're going to have some kind of dispatch operation. You're going to have a professional standards bureau. You're going to have an internal affairs bureau. You're going to have all these other things that go along with the ownership of your own department. Increasingly in the last 50 years, those cities that are new, they didn't do that. Compton is a bit of an outlier. Compton found itself a decade ago as a city in crisis with a department in crisis, and as a means of resolving that crisis, contracted out with the county. So they truly are the outlier. But you see the populations, most cities that have the county sheriffs have smaller general fund budgets. They are contract cities on many fronts. They contract out fire. They contract for libraries. They contract for building or public works, all other types of services. It's also important to take a look at the percentage there along the middle part of the table, percentage law enforcement to general fund. Despite all of the description of a smaller budget, generally speaking, you're going to find that some of those cities still have the same dedication of their general fund to law enforcement as Glendale. Glendale dedicates about 38% of its general fund to police services, as does Lancaster. Palmdale comes close. Compton is almost there as well. When you look at Santa Clarita, which is probably closest to us, not probably, it is closest to us in terms of size, and you say, wow, well, that's something that's a little different. They're only at 21%. I would submit to you that if you look at the very next line, the sworn personnel per 1,000 residents, they carry 0.4 sheriff's deputies per 1,000, meaning that they have that fewer number of deputies patrolling that city. And you say, well, is that possible in Glendale? I would submit to you that it probably isn't possible in Glendale, because during the day, the bedroom community of Santa Clarita empties as all of those folks come down to Glendale and other points to go to work. Glendale during the day swells, and at night we're still 200,000 population. So as I say, it's a different style of policing, different needs that we all have. Here, when you look at, this shows much of that same information, but in graphic form. Here you have the sworn law enforcement personnel in blue. You see the number of actual deputies that are there as part of their contract in that operation. The interesting takeaway here is I would submit to you that the strength of contracting with the county is that you get to pool resources, particularly for non-sworn, particularly for services. So whereas you see Glendale in the red has 100, and I think that says 6 non-sworn personnel, you see 0, 3, 0, 0, 3 for non-sworn law enforcement personnel contracted for by these agencies. That's not to say that these other agencies don't have a records bureau, or don't have jails, or don't have some of these other ancillary services. They're all centralized. And you say, well, isn't that a wonderful thing? Can we be centralized as well? Understand that centralization has its drawbacks. If you want to recover property from the sheriff's department that was taken as part of an action, you aren't going to go to City of Carson or to the City of Santa Clarita. You're going to go to Whittier, I believe is where their yard is. If you're going to access their jail, oftentimes you're going to end up having to go downtown. If you want to get a report, you may very well have to go downtown as opposed to coming to Isabel Street to get those same services here in Glendale. So it does have its degree of trade-off.
Downtown LA.
Downtown LA, ma'am, not downtown Glendale.
No, I mean, not downtown in their city.
Not downtown their city, going to downtown.
So let me just, as you speak about the jails, let me just get this straight, that currently if someone is arrested in Glendale, let's say some college-age kids get into a prank, throwing some eggs or doing something of that nature. In Glendale, when arrested, they're taken to Glendale City Jail. Our safe, clean, state-of-the-art city jail. If we go under the sheriff's model, they're taken to LA County Jail.
They will ultimately make their way to LA County Jail. They may have holding cells in Palmdale, Lancaster, other places, but ultimately would be transferred to a central location.
Wait, haven't individuals arrested in Glendale ended up in county?
After you get arraigned, you will leave us and you enter the county court system. But in terms of a holding cell for that particular that kid that the mayor identified, if you don't have that holding cell, you will go wherever the county needs to take you, and frankly, where they have staffing available, depending on where their resources are allocated over their contracts on any given day.
I mean, the county jail is a bad place. It is a rough place. It is not a place that I don't think any of us would want to see ourselves for a drunk driving, let's say. You know, a drunk driving case, otherwise you'd be in Glendale City Jail with the current model. Under the sheriff's model, you'd be in LA County Jail in a holding cell with rough characters.
That would be the thing.
Okay, and we could elaborate, but I would be digressing, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but that struck me as a critical point.
And I have a question, too, on the non-sworn officers. If we wanted to have more non-sworn, that would mean we'd have to pay for that on top of the contract that we may have with L.A.?
Correct. So you'll get, you would pay for, if you, in your packet there, I know where you're driving because you asked that question previously, was that you'll get 3 or in some cases 0. The services that would otherwise be provided will be centrally located through the County of Los Angeles, not in your local station. That's just, and again, that's the county's model. Not good or bad, it's just a different model.
Mr. Garbett?
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment on slide 15 when we compare Glendale to rest of the cities as far as the salaries go. The cost per capita is $235 versus Carson $182 or Compton $199 or Santa Clarita $96. If we add our non-sworn officers as well, our numbers will be 342 personnel altogether. And if you deduct that from or if you divide that by 70 million or 77 million, our entire budget, it will drop it down to 180 instead of 235. So, I mean, considering all of that, the more personnel that we have, I think that's why this number is a little bit higher. And we all were briefed on this, and I mentioned that. And I think that's what we need to make a little correction, because this number is really high compared to the number of employees that we have and the level of service that they provide. So the 235 could be 180, which is very comparable with Carson, Compton, and rest of them.
Okay. No, yes, sir. What you look at is per capita numbers, so the general fund budgets of those respective cities, sworn personnel per household, and then per capita. The interesting takeaways is that the lower per capita cost for law enforcement services speaks to having a contract. You're getting arguably less service, and that's reflected in the numbers. It seems rather intuitive. And then the budgets are usually smaller. The idea being that you're getting what you can afford to pay for. And as newly independent cities or newly incorporated cities, that seems rather understandable. This is an interesting discussion that really speaks to the county model. You see there you have the populations plotted in the blue bars. What you see next, that red line is sworn personnel per 1,000 residents, and then in that goldish greenish line, station sworn personnel per 1,000 residents. The idea being that you may have folks in a station, and that station operates for any number of cities that contract with the county for sheriff's deputies. So you may actually have 0.58 in Lancaster, but at the station there is 1.32 or 1.22 deputies. Well, what does that mean? That means that if something extraordinarily bad happened and there was an active shooting incident, those deputies in that station could go to that event. And that's good. That speaks to the county's model, that they can roll lots of different resources to a singular kind of event. But what they're paying for, what's contracted for, what happens the other 6 days and 23 and a half hours of the week is that you're going to end up with the 0.58 officer per 1,000. And so, again, it speaks to that activity level, because what is that officer humanly able to do in the context of the amount of time that's being contracted for? I think it's interesting to note that at the same time, when you look at those activity levels, and especially when we were talking about observations, and Councilmember Devine had mentioned, what the connection is between the observations and the reports taken to crime rates. Here you see that even in the extent that Glendale is where it is geographically, with all of the daytime population, all the nighttime population, we generally have a lower Part 1 crime rate than all of these other contract cities. It's probably interesting to note, too, that even in Santa Clarita, where it is a bedroom community, they're still at 15.72 per 1,000 residents on that 5-year average for Part 1 crime. You may expect that to be a little bit lower considering the dynamics of that particular community. When you look at Part 1 crimes between property crimes in red, violent crimes in blue, and the crime rate per 1,000, again, this is just a representation of previous slides that shows that, again, Glendale is getting tremendous productivity and effectiveness by way of that crime rate as it measures for outcomes in terms of making this place a safer place. Here we look at clearance rates, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier in terms of the way that some agencies, particularly larger agencies, for no other factor than logistics and the comprehensibility, if I can use that as a term, because you have so much population, so many incidents that you're dealing with, that the idea of clearing crimes just based on MOs may make sense, and that has something to do, I believe, with the clearance rates that you see there for violent crimes, and maybe even for property crimes in terms of being able to make some resolution there. But Glendale still holds its own across all of these fronts. Misdemeanor felony arrests, you see again activity, productivity. Glendale, 4,000 arrests for misdemeanors, and I think that's 2,200 for felonies. So again, vigilant officers out on the street making sure that this slide is felt in reality. What you see here is that same slide that we showed you in terms of activity by way of reports taken, observations, and service calls. With respect to the Sheriff's Department, great respect, this speaks to the model of policing. Again, they are responsible for large geographic areas. We are responsible for Glendale. And as a result, you see the red line far outstripping any of the other observations from any of the other agencies that were measured with by way of the contract services. You look at reports taken. Folks who live in Santa Clarita will tell you that reports are not taken for a great many types of incidents where you may call the police. When you look at the service calls answered, same type of thing. We will go on an oak tree possibly being illegally trimmed. We will send somebody out there to go make contact. And you hear it all the time, but Glendale is this huge little city, and it's that style of attention to detail and personal interaction that makes it special. This is another one that is kind of the tail of the tape. Our operational response times. Here you see routine calls, priority calls, and emergency calls plotted from top to bottom. The response or the emergency calls in blue, you can see some degree of consistency. Police agencies are very adept to responding to bad things happening very, very quickly, and the county does it very well, almost as well as we do. And for priority calls, accidents, injuries, disturbances, things like that, they do well, almost as good as Glendale. But on the routine calls, when somebody has broken in or vandalized property, we are there in 10 minutes on average, and you see some of these other locations partially because of the geographic size of these locations, but also, again, because of those officer ratios that we talked about. We have more folks to do more things for the benefit of our community, and you see that translating here.
And I think it's important to note that when I looked at this report, which, by the way, was extraordinary, I just compared Glendale with Santa Clarita, and even on this particular graph, Santa Clarita has practically the same population, but we are so much quicker, faster in every category than they are. They just don't have the officers.
It's a function of the police model. It's just a different model is all. And that's the model we've come to grow and expect.
Can some of that be geography?
As I say, in some of those larger agencies spread out in the Antelope Valley, some of that will play out, but it still speaks to the number of officers per thousand you have. Fewer officers per thousand you have, the longer it's going to take you to get there. And you look at the number of calls for service, our folks are busy all day long. When you look at costs, kind of go pound for pound. What does it cost for a deputy? What does it cost for a police officer? That deputy is going to cost about $180,494, an equivalent level of service, salary, and benefits. So this is all in total compensation. Glendale officers, which make up the vast majority of the sworn safety workforce, are less expensive than those deputies. So you look at it, okay, how am I going to save money if that officer is going to cost less than what that deputy is going to cost? Well, we talked about it before. You're going to try to attribute as much as you can towards pooling those support services, but that comes with a major trade-off. So when you look at the ultimate results and what ends up happening, the GPD, LASD is a very proud organization. They do a wonderful job, but it is a different business model. When you look at having more dedicated sworn police officers and non-sworn personnel, I can't stress that enough, and non-sworn personnel, that it does make a difference in the level of service that you provide. And it's just that some agencies, some communities are satisfied with a lower level of service. I will say lower level of service, not just different, but lower, because it's less convenient and less on demand than what you have in Glendale. And that speaks to that different business model. The contract cities have a number of things in common. One of them is more Part 1 crimes and lower budgets. It's not that they want higher crime, it's that that's what they can afford. When you look overall at that tail of the tape for GPD and LASD, again, you have to examine that if the resources are roughly equivalent in total cost and total compensation, it makes it awfully difficult to say that somehow we're going to save a heck of a lot of money. 79% of our sworn personnel are those officers, and those officers are going to be less expensive than those deputies. I will tell you that and reiterate that where the county will make a difference by way of saving money is in pooling resources. But what does that mean? That means that your jail, your property room, the DNA lab, the helicopter, and some people don't like the helicopter, but the helicopter is a tremendous force multiplier and asset. All of those things no longer exist for you. And so to the extent that you want that full service department to meet your needs, because hopefully you never need the police department, but when you need them, you want to make sure that they are there to provide the highest level of service, that notion of a pooled efficiency actually being centralization isn't necessarily what that resident wants to hear. The resources and amenities located for available at Glendale residents' convenience overall. Not in downtown LA, not in Whittier, not in other parts of the county, but here in Glendale. And it's worth noting that even if you went that direction, even if you said, fine, I don't care about convenience, I'll cross that bridge when I get to it, it's important to note that if you cut out all of those services, you still don't outweigh the loss of revenue from the loss of that portion of the UUT. If you got rid of a portion of the upper management, all the executive management and some of the upper management, because you're still going to have management over the department, got rid of all the services kept, field service, investigative services intact, maybe you save $13.5 million, maybe on your best day. Well, we have to cut 17.5 potentially if residents decide that they don't want to pay that portion of the UUT that's been in place for well more than 40 years. That is important to note, because what that means is not only would you have to make those cuts and sacrifice all of those conveniences and all of that exceptional customer service, but you also have to delve into the sworn safety resources that impact those Part 1 crimes and the crime rate and the response times. Critically important that folks understand that. The last thing that probably should be more important really to the council, but also to the community, because it is timely, is that when you contract out, you lose the ability to set priorities for your local police force. Council was beset with complaints about burglaries in the canyons, and you made that known to Chief Castro. Chief Castro does what he needs to do with all of his officers and units, and what do you know? We see an impact out in the street. We see a reduction and arrests. When we have issues and complaints about pedestrian safety and speeding and reckless driving, a lot of those that you look in your packet, a lot of those cities are contracting for 2 motors, not the 18 motors that we have at our disposal that are making a difference, that are keeping people safe. And you are able to tell me and Chief Castro what is important to you, and we're able to make that difference in real time. Why? Because it's the Glendale Police Department. So important things to consider in terms of looking at a side-by-side comparison. At the end of the day, the trade-offs that you'll have to evaluate by way of trying to get to savings but not impact any of the level of services really just does not work. Contracting does not make sense for an agency and an organization and a community as big as Glendale, given the reputation and the experiences that our residents and businesses have become accustomed to. If you want, I was going to run through fire. Both Chief Castro and Chief Fish are here, and you can ask questions of them, or if you want to ask questions now, it's certainly your pleasure.
Okay, well, let's go with police questions. Ms. Devine.
Okay, well, you covered basically everything I wanted to. The sharing issue. Chief Castro, do you want to just speak for a moment on the sharing issue? I know Mr. Ochoa covered that, but just so the public knows what the impact of all the sharing has on our safety.
In terms of the Sheriff's Department sharing of assets?
Yes.
Well, having your own localized assets gives us the ability to respond to incidents instantaneously and not having to wait. We have canines that are on duty during peak hours, so when an incident occurs, like we had a burglary up in Chevy Chase Canyon, 2 of our police dogs, along with our helicopter, were on scene within minutes, allowing us to observe the suspects fleeing, coordinate and capture them. With outside shared resources, you're rolling those resources from many parts of the county to get here. You're not going to have that type of response. In terms of what you've been hearing a lot about in terms of residential burglary, they're on the rise throughout the county, throughout the region. We just did a study for the last 14 months. The month of February was the lowest number of residential burglaries in over a year in this community. And that was to a response to an increase of outside individuals coming into our community, victimizing our residential neighborhoods. We applied immediate local assets, and we made more arrests than we've made, and we took these groups from outside of our community who should be incarcerated under previous laws but aren't, and we're able to make that kind of a response so our community can understand that we hear them when it comes to traffic, the same thing. Using enforcement, education, using signboards, using any method we can, because you have those local assets We can respond quickly to the adjustments that need to be made when regional problems occur within our city limits. You just don't have that in a policing model that's different than what we employ here in Glendale.
Thank you. And Mr. Cho, this one is for you and perhaps Chief Castro. And I know it's going to come up tonight, and that's the medical, the post-employment medical, and what is the difference? Is there a difference between county and our city?
Well, the county offers a pension just like the city of Glendale does. We participate through PERS, however. They have a standalone system. Many of their employees still have and are bargained for and will receive some degree of lifetime medical. Glendale doesn't have that. Glendale never had that, and to the extent that, as you know, a very difficult decision was made by this council to anticipate GASB 68 upcoming, where we were going to have to book OPEB liability to the tune of $260 million on our balance sheet. You did the hard thing and unblended medical rates to the extent that our OPEB liability is effectively $20 million as opposed to $260 million. Many agencies, I believe even the county, but certainly the state, have yet to do that. They will have to reckon with it at some point, however.
If I may add also, as you mentioned for medical, as I get ready to kick it off to fire, the comparison here also is we carry AEDs in our car, external defibrillators, so our officers can respond when they arrive at the emergency scene of a cardiac case, apply that equipment. We've just recently launched our tactical medical program. You have a partnership between law enforcement and fire unlike any other city, and that provides a higher level of not just public safety, but police officers are now working hand in hand with fire to make sure we can help save lives, and firefighters are working hand in hand with police officers to be ready to respond to emergencies, active shooters, or other major crimes in our community as a team.
And I have to mention, too, that you have officers that are bilingual and trilingual, and we don't know exactly what the county is going to provide when they come out to these instances and situations. I just feel that the bottom line here is what's your safety worth to you. And also, our police officers stay with the department longer, I think, than L.A.
On average, and
Bragg
speaking
County.
with staff I know from the Sheriff's Department, yes, they do move around. It's a large county, and people move around to different assignments and don't usually stay within a station house for 30 years, which is common in a community like this.
I always laugh and joke and say that if we get L.A. County, they'd never be able to find my house on Benoe Scotia Road. Guess I shouldn't have given mine.
Yeah, don't mention the numbers on
I
the
know, I'm
houses.
sorry.
Give them a head start.
But if they do, we have a state-of-the-art jail. So.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you.
Mr. Carpeccia?
Thank you, Chief. Question regarding the response time. I compare Glendale to Santa Clarita, which is population-wise they're a little bit larger than us, but we are very close to them. And can you explain the emergency calls? We are pretty much very close. Then you come to priority calls. Even the cities like Palmdale, Lancaster, which are smaller than us, they're, it's much longer. But on routine calls, can you explain one more time what the routine calls are? Because the difference between Glendale and Santa Clarita is almost 45 minutes. So I wanted to know what are the routine calls and how many of these calls we get on an annual basis, if you have that number.
Routine calls are going to be calls for service such as a report call. Someone is the victim of a crime. Perhaps the suspects are not on scene, so we are going to send personnel out to take a report to investigate. It could be, what I like to call them is quality of life calls. Somebody calls about loud music, juveniles in the street causing a problem, something that's causing a problem to that resident. And it's sometimes for law enforcement, we are the people they call 24/7. So over the weekend, we had a call that somebody perhaps was unlawfully cutting down an oak tree. This was a major problem. We go out, we verified that they had the proper documentation and it was okay. But that's what it is. It's routine calls where people call the police because they want us to come and check something out to make sure it's not going to turn into an emergency call or a crime, or just to make sure that something's not happening that's going to diminish the quality of life in their neighborhood, or it's a suspicious call, it's juveniles up on the hillsides looking at the views, it's those type of calls, and we respond in a quick manner. We don't just say, we'll get there when we get there. We put it in the queue and we send officers as soon as they're available.
Because I'm looking at Palmdale and Lancaster, they're 81 minutes and 84 minutes versus almost 9.9 minutes in Glendale. So
What was the Glendale one again?
9.9, but Palmdale is 81.2 minutes, Lancaster is 84.3 minutes, and Santa Clarita, which is closer to us, is 55.9 minutes.
Of course, it's an average.
55 minutes.
I know with those calls, sometimes it takes an hour in Glendale. I mean, it's not always 9 minutes. It depends on what night of the week, what else is going on.
And there's our averages for them, so their average of an hour could be 2 hours.
That's true.
In some cases.
Okay, thank you.
I think,
Mr. Sinatra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fact of the matter is, anyone who's had to deal with Glendale PD, when it's an emergency call, for example, I've had situations where there's been false alarms up in the furthest corner of Glendale, Emerald Isle, and the response time is ridiculously short. It's a fact. I say that because the alarm has gone off a few too many times. Of course, this was at my old place. But our police responds in a very, very fast manner. And if I boil down this report, the way I see it is that we pay our police top dollar. We don't pay the most, but we get pretty much the best service from our police officers in our department. So that's all I have, Ms. Friedman.
Not only that, when they come, they do a full report. Years ago, before I was on council, I called about a possible break-in at my house. And they came and they dusted for fingerprints. And I don't think that they do that in Los Angeles. And by the way, there was no break-in, and they still dusted for fingerprints just to make sure, and they really checked everything out, and there were, I think, 3 cars there. So they took it very, very seriously. And I remember when I lived in Los Angeles, I had a situation where I came home very late one night, and I lived on a street up in the hills, in the Hollywood Hills, and there were 2 men in a van sitting in front of my house. And I was not going to get out of that car and walk to my front door with these 2 men just sitting in a van. I think it was 1 a.m. in front of my house. And I called the LAPD, and by the way, a very fine organization, and I asked for some help, and they told me to wait, and I waited 2 hours. And then I finally just walked in my house, even though the men were still there. And that would not happen in Glendale.
And if you look at, there's a slide that showed the number of reports taken, and you could show it indicated that Glendale takes more reports on average than any of those other cities. And that's because we consider ourselves full service, and we will take our reports for our residents to document these. So that also drives our crime rate a little bit. Even though our crime rate is good, you'll see when we're taking more reports and making more arrests, we're actually creating more crime statistics for our community. If you're a city that's not doing that, if you're not taking every report because you tell a resident, well, nothing's going to happen here, so I'll just document it for you in another way, or they're not making arrests, their crime rates are going to be lower.
Right.
Doesn't mean the cities are any safer.
Good point. I think we definitely I know we take pride in our community and our safety. And we can't pretend that we're somehow so different from surrounding cities that it's all about the residents. That's a big part of it, but a lot of it is due to the good work of the Glendale Police Department and the officers. It's no question in my mind.
It's a partnership. That's what makes it work for us.
Great. As for me, I do hold the services that our GPD give us in very high regard. I wouldn't trade you guys for a Marine Expeditionary Force because you do have a balance. It's not just being out there strong-armed. It's taking those police reports. It's dusting. It's helping a neighbor with smooth out an issue with his next door neighbor. It's our motor. It's everything else. So this, let's put this in context again. That in the event we would have to cut budget, the alternative to our GPD is to contract out with the LA County Sheriffs, and we're dealing with a completely different type of policing model that we wouldn't fall into chaos, clearly. But this slide perhaps highlights it all. We'd be facing a much, much longer time for responses in every one of the categories of routine, priority, and emergency. So,
question,
okay, Mr.
Chief, does the LA County Sheriff Department have the programs that we have, community programs that we have in Glendale with the rest of the communities they contract out with?
They have
like the
similar,
K9.
They do have similar programs. You just it's you pay for what you want. So a lot of the initial costs, a lot of those other cities don't pay for those ancillary services. So they don't have the youth programs. They don't have the elderly educational programs. They don't have the pedestrian traffic programs. They may not have the car seat programs we provide for parents to show them how to do those things. They may not have all the grant programs that we get. There's a lot of different resources that we have. To say that you couldn't get them, you could. You're just going to pay for them. And then when you pay for everything that you have here in an a la carte menu from a contractor, you're not saving any money when you get down to the end of the game, because it all costs. The similar price is going to cost for the services that we provide to you. I would tell you, though, in Glendale, we do it in a more efficient way than most other places. That's why we're able to do what we do with less resources than smaller agencies per capita.
Mr. Mayor.
So DUI checkpoints extra.
If they don't have the grants and you don't pay for traffic, you'd have to contract that, yes, for that service.
Pedestrian crosswalk violations extra. All these special things that we do, and we do it just as quickly as us speaking to the city manager to say, hey, did you hear what that resident said? There's a problem in this street, in this neighborhood. The next day, you're on it and you're working to solve the problem. There's several more layers of communication and red tape that have to go through to the sheriff's model.
I just, this report will be on our website, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And I just want to say to those people that are watching and those of you that are here tonight, go on the website, look at this, and especially go to page 48 for pros and cons of contracting law enforcement services. It will give you a really good look at what we will be losing if the UUT is repealed and we are contracting. It's absolutely great, as I said, a great report, and it's right here on page 48. So,
and plus, Glendale PD became a part of the fabric of the community. It's not just policing; it's just you're part of the community. So that's very important as well.
Okay, many of your personnel grew up here, went to school here, and choose to work here because they care about this community.
And that's how we like it.
Thank you, Chief. And the police department is just half of our public safety team. And I think next up, perhaps with an introduction by Mr. Ochoa, we're not going to bring the chief up, are we? We're going to go to Eileen and...
Well, I can speak much more quickly than both of them put together, I think. So we'll run through some of these. And by way of the comparisons, and certainly Eileen and her audit team are here to answer any questions, and I'm sure you'll have a number of questions for the chief as he goes through. Same kind of by the numbers description, summary of fire services in LA County Fire. It's a mixed bag, I would tell you, because on the one hand, fire services are delivered in LA County, again, with our partners in the county on a much more regional basis to begin with. But similarly, it's a different business model that is employed by the County of Los Angeles versus the city of Glendale. We have been at the forefront of advanced life support, basic life support programming over the last several years in particular, as we've moved forward with a program that keeps 4-person engine and truck companies and a minimum of 2 paramedics on each of those companies, and utilizing rescue ambulances as opposed to 3-person engines offered by the county and paramedic squads. And what that means is that not every one of the districts that the county operates will have a paramedic capability, and we know that the vast majority of our calls are EMS calls. So in all 9 of our districts, you'll find a paramedic engine or truck. We have that capability. We are a full functioning fire department. We have, and it's similar to the police department in terms of that tooth to tail ratio, but in a fire department, generally speaking, it is even more. It's even less support services to keep a field out fighting fires and answering paramedic calls, and you'll see that kind of laced through this presentation. But the key takeaways: 4-person minimum staffing on engines, and in terms of outcomes, an ISO Class 1 rating that ultimately translates into lower property insurance costs for our property owners, both commercial and residential. The more expensive the property, and you see what we have downtown by way of our major employers, potentially the greater the savings depending on your particular insurance needs and products that you buy. But that is a reflection of the full service capacity of Glendale Fire, and it's worth noting that not many agencies have a Class 1 designation. Certainly the chief can give you all of the good information about what that means as he's explored that further to try to quantify that benefit. Interesting here, you see that the cities, the newer incorporated cities like Santa Clarita, 1987 incorporation date, they are part of the county. They actually fund their fire department not through their city council, but rather directly through an assessment on their property tax bill. So the city is effectively cut out of the policy-making decision there. However, other cities, and this is not uncommon, especially in the San Gabriel Valley where you have 30 smaller cities, but these are two of the larger cities that contract with LA County, El Monte and Pomona. Both of those older cities, 1912 and 1888 incorporation respectively, went to the county in the 1990s, mid and late 90s, and a lot of that is driven by the fact that the county, for most of the line level positions, does indeed pay more. So again, it gets back to that notion, are you going to save money? And you'll see if you go pound for pound, no, it isn't. You aren't going to be able to save that degree of funding. A lot of comparability in terms of the cost for providing service from 19% in El Monte, again, a function of what they can afford to pay. The county has the ability to adjust its contract based on the city's ability to pay. And in Pomona, they're at 26% of their general fund. Glendale, standalone department, 25% of its general fund. And as I say, Santa Clarita, with a $40 million budget, almost $42 million budget, getting roughly equivalent to our budget, that's billed directly to the property owner vis-a-vis the property tax bill. And you look at the number of personnel again, per capita, we're getting closer in terms of that apples to apples ratio. What you see here is population in the blue bars. What you see on the red line is the sworn personnel per 1,000 residents. Here in Glendale, we are able and fortunate to offer more personnel per 1,000 residents. And again, that speaks to that ability to pay as well as the respective challenges that Glendale offers. We have high-rise buildings. We have urban interface with wildlife. We have a river. We have studios. We have a community spread out over 30 acres, or 30 square miles, rather. We have many, many challenges. They do as well. But I think you find that we are well suited with 9 stations to be able to cover the entire community. Here's kind of the tail of the tape. What you see on the cost comparisons for fire captains, the cost there is $269,975 is the 15-16 estimate. Here in Glendale, $238,272. It's roughly 11, almost 12% less than what the county charges. You see it there for firefighter specialist, fire engineer, which would be equivalent to our engineer there, and then you have firefighter at the 56-hour. But all the way across the board, you see that Glendale's cost is going to be less. Now, if you extrapolate for a 4-person engine or truck to try to get apples to apples, you see still on that bottom line our cost for the full 4-person engine or truck is going to be well less, $171,000, almost $172,000 less than what the county would be charging us. Yes, sir.
Quick question in regards to comparison. We have high rises, and I don't think Santa Clarita has that kind of a downtown that we have. But
not nearly the intensity.
Okay. And also, our fire department conducts inspections too, right?
Company inspection program, yes, sir.
Plan check, inspection.
That's correct.
And does the county do the same thing? I mean, if they want to do it, do we have to go to where do we go to get the inspection done?
You would likely be contracting through City Hall for fire plan checks.
LA City Hall?
No, I'm sorry. They're at Santa Clarita City Hall or El Monte City Hall. You would hire a fire plan checker to be there. That would be an additional cost to you.
So if you wanted to get your plans, fire plans checked, you have to go to Santa Clarita or...
In those cities, yeah, you would go to those. And again, it's an a la carte menu.
No, if in Glendale, if let's say tomorrow, the magic wand and we turn the county tomorrow, where do we go for a plan check?
We would do the same thing and try to hire folks to come do fire plan checks here, but it wouldn't necessarily be part of the county contract.
Right, so you have to pay extra for it.
You're going to pay on that a la carte menu, yes, sir.
Thank you.
And here you have fire protection per capita costs. We have shaded in the Santa Clarita number to kind of give some rough equivalency. You see that light blue area representing what they pay by way of their direct property tax bill. But again, the takeaway is the per household cost, the per capita cost, and we are very much in alignment in the household cost. The household costs were actually less than what Santa Clarita is charging. In terms of the population, the households, the number of fire stations plotted along the top, and the number of apparatus plotted along the top. Number of fire stations. El Monte has 4 stations. The Santa Clarita has 9. We have 9. Pomona has 7. You see the degree of the number of apparatus with our 12 engine companies, truck companies. The 14 that you see there for Santa Clarita gives you an idea about their operational ability to answer all the calls that they do get. This is rather an interesting slide where you look at the 3-year averages by way of incident. As I said, the vast majority, 87% of our calls are rescue EMS. Fires and explosions are other, but understand that while you say, wow, a lot of fires in Glendale relative to the other agencies, this is going to speak to the discussion on how we categorize what the calls are. If we get an alarm call that happens to be a false alarm call, that is still a fire call, and that's where you see that plotted out there in the blue along the right-hand side. But you see that we have just a number of calls that we go on, and it's a function really, and you'll see in a second, of the aging demographic here in Glendale. Yes, ma'am.
A question on the advanced life support. Can I ask the chief, does LA have that sort of a program, LA County, our life support, the 9?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, and Mr. Vine, yes. They do have ALS, but it's totally different than the paradigm that we have. The paradigm that we run currently has 2 ALS paramedics, which means they can do all the advanced directives within their scope of practice in all 9 districts within our city. To compare that to like the city of Santa Clarita, they have 4 squads. And if you remember Squad 51 on emergency, for those that remember that television show, I'm dating myself, I know. That Johnny and Roy were on a squad. It was a truck. They're paramedics, right?
You remember their names?
Johnny and Roy. Absolutely. No, it's and again,
has a crush on
to give you some perspective, right? Johnny and Roy were 2 paramedics. There's only 4 of those in Santa Clarita, whereas in our city, in every single one of our districts, we have ALS coverage, which means we're getting to your problem faster with better resources. So if time is tissue, and that's what the adage is, yeah, we're going to save more lives, and we're going to have better outcomes in our medical calls that we run 87% of. Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Excellent.
thank you.
And Chief, how many calls per year?
So last year we ran 19,413, and I'm thinking we're tracking right now to go over 20,000 at the rate we're going.
And average call time again, medical emergency call time?
We're going to get to that. It's the average response time is about 4 minutes, a little over 4 minutes on a medical call.
What you see here in terms of that discussion of what's going on with Glendale and why we have quite so many calls. You see the little kind of the tail end of this demographic slide. We have an aging population, more so than what you see in some of these other communities. And so oftentimes this community is looking to access the healthcare system by way of 911 and emergency rooms. We are extraordinarily diverse. And so having a department that matches up in terms of knowing the community and having a great deal of history with the community, especially as you see repeat calls, and we try to get them better outcomes so that they aren't repeat calls, but still we will go on 20,000 calls this year. You see that we are well suited and balanced to Glendale. Chief, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to this particular one.
Certainly. So the same thing that goes with your police department goes with your fire department. You have people that are going to be here for 30 years. They're not going to be coming in, working in a fire station, and working in West Hollywood the next day, and the very next year they could be working in La Cañada. They're not tied to your community at all. Whereas the people within your fire department are your fire department. They belong to you. You have complete control over them. And for instance, like myself, 29 years on the department, I know all the 9 districts very thoroughly, and I know the problems that exist, and we can much more proactively take care of the problems that might come up, say, for instance, on a brush fire or a structure fire or any other type of disaster.
And I know they can find my house.
That's right. That's right.
This is true.
That's why you're our chief.
That's right. And Chief, will you speak to the fact that every call you go on, you have 2 paramedics, and that is not a model that LA Fire has? Am I correct in saying that?
Yes. It depends. On an ALS call, you're going to get 2 paramedics in the county. On a BLS call, you may not. It just depends. But on our incidents, you're going to get ALS on every call right now. Is that the most efficient way? And not necessarily, but we feel that it is the best way to handle your problem within the city of Glendale. And again, it's all a matter of service level. We feel that if you're having a problem, we want to bring the best to you, and that's what we do.
And on the chief makes a point on the EMS calls, on the fire calls where we have to enter a building. It's important to have that 4-person engine because under the guideline of 2 in, 2 out, or the standard 2 in, 2 out, if you arrive with a 3-person engine, you need to have 2 people outside and 2 people going in. You can't just have 1 person going in. If you figure that the engineer is there to make sure that everyone on a fire ground has a very specific job, and the captain is the supervisor of what's happening at that incident. The engineer is there to make sure that you hook up if you're hooking to a hydrant or if you're just pumping from the water that's in the tank. That remaining firefighter is left with a much more of a marginal series of responsibilities until somebody else can arrive to be able to go with him or her into a building. We don't have that luxury in many cities, yet we in Glendale have that luxury because we operate 4-person engines.
And to add on to that just a little bit, that definitely keeps small fires small. So by the fact that we can go into a building that may not have a rescue problem but does have a fire that's advancing and the time temperature curve where fire doubles every 5 minutes, we can get in there, keep these small fires small, keeping a reduced amount of damage to the building. And it truly has paid in big dividends. It makes a big difference in your community.
This slide here is perhaps one of the most compelling you'll see as the comparison to county and Glendale. And this shows you the station incidents by category. And so you see, just like you saw on the previous slide, EMS, other, and then fire and explosion. The takeaway, however, is the number on top of each one of those stacks. On average, our stations are extraordinarily busy, much more so than what you see in some of these county stations. That's important because to the extent that there is a level and a degree of being accustomed to the activity levels in these respective stations out in the county system, our folks haven't known that for quite some time. We get amazing cost efficiency from the relatively same numbers of personnel that we offer at relatively the same cost that they pay, but they're operating sometimes almost double the amount of calls. Critically important for us. What you see here is what Chief was indicating by way of response times. On fire response, you see that we are there at 5:21. I'll let the Chief talk about reasons as to why that is the case and speaks to the way that some agencies keep track of their performance indicators. And by the same token, you see on medical calls the 4:20, something we're very proud of. And then the service average response times there on the lower left-hand side. Do you want to just cover that at all without stepping on the toes of our
It'd
colleagues?
be hard to do, but I'll do my best, yes. So if you look at the medical response time, it's basically 4 minutes, 20 seconds, right? And if you take the fire response time for Glendale, it's 5 minutes, it's 61 seconds more. The reason why that is because when we go to a fire, the people that go to fires have to dress, right? Our firefighters have to get dressed in their turnouts, their brush gear, whatever the incident may dictate. And so there's a turnout time that's a little more increased. To have a turnout time of 4:31 on a medical in El Monte and have a fire average response time of 4:29, that's telling you that they're not recording it the same. So what they're doing, it is my opinion that they go out and press the en route button and then they get themselves dressed, whereas we are instructed to press the button when we're actually en route. So it's a little more accurate of a time. How they're getting to a fire faster than an emergency medical call does not make sense to me, and it shouldn't make sense to you either. Ours is a little more accurate as to the reality of how we respond to incidents.
When we took a look at total station calls, again, speaking to productivity, we have over a period of years, over the last 3 years, and then the average incidents per 1,000 residents. So again, what you're seeing in the escalating number of calls, the chief had indicated this runs through 14. We're at almost 17,000 calls there. We will get close or actually eclipse 20,000 calls in 2016. So you see ever increasing activity levels, the average incident per 1,000 residents, and that is far outstripping the other communities, which again, not good or bad, it just speaks to the cost efficiency of our people and our system. Here we see the total apparatus responses again over a 3-year period, and the number of responses that go on for the apparatus that we have. The responses are going to be higher. Our trucks and our engines are out on the street that much more, providing that degree of service. By way of summary, again, similar to police, you see that the LA County does a fine job of what they do. It's just a different service model than what we do. And I would argue that Glendale Fire, for what we have become accustomed to, does it better in terms of our system and our mode of operation, and frankly does it at a lesser price, more cost efficient than what you would find if you went pound for pound with the County of Los Angeles. We have much more productivity, higher incidents during the day, and better response times overall. And at the end of the day, the Class 1 rating does separate us apart from other agencies. To the extent that adopting a county staffing model would be implemented here in the city, it's arguable that looking at those productivity numbers, that county apparatus may be coming back to you to say, well, in order to meet Glendale's call load, we couldn't do it the way that you do it. We would need to add a few more engines into the various companies around the city, which of course adds cost. To the extent that the personnel costs are generally higher for the County of Los Angeles, speaks to your ability to say, let's just go county and magically expect that we're going to save money. It does not work that way. Specifically, when you consider that the tooth to tail ratio with the fire department is 94%, meaning that 94% of their personnel costs are sworn fire safety employees as opposed to service employees. And even in the PD, it's almost 70%. There just isn't enough things that you would wantonly or easily cut and say it's not going to have an impact on my customers, on my residents and businesses. There's not enough there to cut to meet the hole that's created in the budget by the loss of utility user tax revenue for the water, gas, and electric charges. So with the marginal savings being achieved, if you were just to go with a comparable level of service, because I don't hear anyone asking for a lower level of service, then that inherently means that you will have to cut the level of service, which increases the response times, eliminates the benefits of being a Class 1 department, and ultimately leads to a less sense of security and less real security and safety for our residents and businesses. That's a whole lot of information on this supplemental report. Certainly, both of the chiefs are available, as is the audit team, and we're happy to answer any questions for the council.
I just have one more question,
Yes,
Mr. Mayor. Chief, can you tell me about something about what would the management structure be like with under the county as compared to Glendale City?
Excellent question. So what you have in typical county battalion is you have a battalion chief with around 5 to 7 stations or 5 to 7 companies. Right now, you're running very lean in Glendale with your command staff. you have a fire chief, a deputy chief, and 5 battalion chiefs, 3 of which run an Alpha, a Bravo, and a Charlie platoon, the 3 platoons. Each one of those platoons, battalion chiefs, is responsible for 12 companies. So the ratio of 12 to 1 is not a typical ratio you're going to see outside of Glendale. So we are very lean. They bring in their services. It is my assumption that they would not run a 12 to 1 ratio, company officer or fire captain to battalion chief. They would want to split the city into 2 battalions, increasing the overhead by probably double of what you see for Glendale. So again, what you're seeing in Glendale, we are very lean on our management ranks. And that is something that I would like to address down the road, but as it is right now, it is what it is. And we do what we do, and we get it done. We're we do more with less. That's truly the mantra that the Glendale Fire Department works with.
Okay, I do have some cards. Would you like to hear from the cards, or would you like to?
Okay, we'll wait for the card.
Dan Watson, followed by Bill Talafiero.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and member of council. My name is Dan Watson. I'm a longtime resident of Glendale and a 41-year veteran of law enforcement in California. I spent the first 28 years in the city that Mr. Ochoa referred to as the evil empire, Los Angeles. But it was a good experience because it's very similar in size and in many ways with the LA County Sheriff's Department. I also spent 13 years as a police chief in South Pasadena and then later Mammoth Lakes, where I retired a little over a year ago. And in each of those cities, we considered contracting with the county for law enforcement services. In South Pasadena, of course, LA County, and in Mammoth, it was Mono County. So I have a fair amount of experience and insight, I think, in how it operates and what some of the other factors that haven't been discussed in the very thorough report and presentation by Mr. Ochoa and Chief Castro. And I'm not going to speak at all about fire service because that's not my area of expertise. LA County Sheriff's Department contracts with about half the cities in the county. The majority of them are very small. Cities like Temple City, much smaller than us. The ones cited here are the ones that are similar in size, and all of them never had a police department. They all, when they incorporated, became a contract city. And I'm not here to criticize the Sheriff's Department at all. They're a fine organization, notwithstanding some current problems that they're taking care of. I've known Sheriff McDonald for close to 30 years. He's a great leader and is doing a fine job. And as was noted tonight, the Sheriff's Department does provide a good level of service to the many cities that they serve. But I want to talk about some intangibles that can't be measured in dollars and cents or by gathering data. And it's the type of service. It was alluded to by tonight, but it's the type of service and the relationship between deputies and the officers assigned to a community. And this is based on my observations working in a huge department and then working in 2 small departments. And while I've lived in Glendale most of my life, I also lived briefly in La Cañada, where I got to see the level of service by the Sheriff's Department there. First thing that has to be considered is loss of control, loss of local control. It was mentioned the different salaries, the cost of a deputy compared to an officer, that can go up and down. But you have the ability as the council to negotiate your benefit package to your employees. If you have a lean year and a contract is up, you get to control what type of increase, if any, they're going to get. You don't have any control over contracts that are entered into by the Sheriff's Department. So if the Sheriff's Department the county is having a good year and they decide to grant a nice cost of living increase to the deputies and you can't afford it, that gets passed on to you. And if you can't afford it, your option is to either find the funds somewhere else or reduce the level of service that's being provided by the sheriff, reduce the contract. I believe more than any other arm of government, law enforcement should reflect the diversity of the community that they serve. We're in people's homes, where we see them at their most vulnerable, and it's really important. And the Glendale Police Department and the city has worked very hard to reflect the diversity of the community, especially the large Armenian population. There's more work to be done, but they can direct their recruiting efforts towards targeting communities that are underrepresented. Sheriff's Department they don't have the ability to do that because they're too big. So over the course of time, your diversity is probably going to be less reflective of the community than it is now and where you want to go as a city council. It was briefly mentioned, I think, by Chief Castro or maybe Mr. Ochoa about the stability of the workforce. You will have, officers that work in are hired by a police department, generally will stay for their entire career. With a sheriff's department, they come in when they get promoted. They will transfer. If they get promoted to sergeant, they leave Glendale. They go to another part of this, typically to the jail, and you lose that expertise. It takes years to become a fully functional, competent police officer, and when that happens and someone promotes out, you're losing that and you're starting all over. You lose that intimate knowledge that comes with officers that have spent their entire career in the same community.
Mr. Watson, your time is up. If you have a concluding sentence or two, that would be great.
Let me just say, I know it's a difficult challenge the council's facing. If this measure passes, I'm strongly opposed to repealing the UUT. But if that happens, I also would strongly encourage the council to really carefully and seriously consider all the impacts of contracting out for law enforcement. I think it's something. We have a great police department. We've got a great chief, and I think we want to continue what we've had for generations. So thank you.
Thank you. Bill Taliaferro.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. My name is Bill Taliaferro, and I live in Glendale, up in the Montrose area. And it's kind of hard to go after mom and apple pie tonight. I mean, this is how do you criticize? Or my intention is not to criticize or at all say anything negative about the police or fire department, but I know that's the main thing here on the agenda, is to talk about how we can adjust this in case these utility users tax is repealed. Since I've been kind of interested in this whole thing, what really got me involved in it was during the increase in the utility rates when we increased it by 29.1%, and on top of that was a 7% utility tax. And I thought to myself, well, what happened to all that money? Why is all that money? What happened to it? Why isn't there money someplace that we can cut in the city that doesn't include the fire and police protection? I think everybody that signed the petition, everybody that was interested in cutting a very small tax in the city, had no intention of impacting something as basic as your fire and police. But there is an opportunity here to maybe impact other things in the city. I can't tell you what it is, but I'm sure there's a lot of items that somehow come back. And one of the things I looked on the list of the people that, my background is I work in the motion picture. I worked in the motion picture business, and I never made anywhere close to the kind of money that is now made by city employees. I was looking at the list. There was, out of the first 50 people on the employee list, there's ranges from $242,000 to over $377,000. And out of the first 176 people that work for the city, over there's $200,000 is how much they make per person. And I'm thinking, when I was growing up, it used to be that city employees or government employees didn't make as much as the private sector. And that, I think maybe that more than anything else is what really got me involved with this. And what can you say? When nobody, when you see how much these people, the employees of the city make versus the private sector. And when I went around and talked to people about this, their reaction was, God, I'm glad you're doing something. Because people, when you go out and get petitions signed on something like this, people still feel so frustrated because they see all the new buildings going up in Glendale. They see all the income that's coming in. For example, I was here one time and I understand like 90% of the new, I think you made the mention that 90% of the new units have been rented. Well, where is the money? Where is that money? Why isn't there enough money to do other things other than, raise taxes? So anyway, thank you. I'm sorry I'm a little disjointed, but I was kind of blown away by the presentation tonight and how impressed I am with our services. But thank you.
Thank you. Mike Mohill.
Do we want Mr. Ochoa maybe to speak to that after the speakers?
Well, you have to keep it on the item, but Mr. Mohill.
Good evening, council members. My name is Mike Mohill. I don't have 45 minutes to talk tonight, like the police and the fire department, to say how wonderful their organization is. But I respect my police and firemen of Glendale. I just don't like their politics. Let me give you an example. About 15 years ago, I asked our Glendale Fire Department to come to my house for a fire inspection. A man came, street clothes, nothing fancy, driving a civilian car with a clipboard. Spent about an hour at my house and said, I'll be back in about a week. And about a week later, he did come back with his clipboard and the report. About 2 years ago, I asked for the same report from the Glendale Fire Department. A big red fire truck worth thousands of dollars came to my house with not one, not two, not three, but 4 firefighters, making salaries and pensions of $150,000 to over $200,000 a year. And they're going to be retiring at age 50 or 55 because of their pension arrangements. We cannot afford this service anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, the viewing audience, please, this is your opportunity to shrink the size of government. Only cities that belong to CalPERS, like Glendale does, has filed for bankruptcy protection. The county doesn't. They're a self-funded organization. Glendale is not. We have to guarantee CalPERS 7.5% return on their investments. Now we're on the hook. Again, city of Santa Ana, city of San Bernardino, they both filed for bankruptcy protection in 2012. Why? Because they had CalPERS. And that's what the city of Glendale has. CalPERS, CalPERS, and CalPERS. Again, the city employees are good. They're good people. It's their politics. If they were concerned about the community, they would not be taking these pay raises and these pensions that are bankrupting us. They also want to go ahead and raise our electric and our water rates and transfer that money to the general fund to pay for their salaries and pensions. 80% of the budget today is for the salaries and the pension of the city workforce. Is that fair, council members? Ladies and gentlemen, the viewing audience, ask yourself, can we afford a Cadillac program when we're all living on a Ford standard of living? You know, I like to live in Beverly Hills. How about San Marino? Oh, by the way, did you know that locking out of Flint Ridge, Malibu, they have county services and they can afford their own fire department, police department. City of Yorba Linda got rid of their services and went to the county. We could only afford county service today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mohill. Tamara Movsesian.
Mr. Mayor and council members, Office of the City Clerk has hired reliable translations. Their employee is Harry Zardayan. He will be translating Armenian to English for us.
Yes.
Hold on one second. So because of the translation, I'm going to allow an additional period of time for the translation to occur. So the general time is 3 minutes to speak. I'm going to afford another 2 minutes so the translation can come to us.
Քինգ գրոպ են դատես հավելել երկու րոպե քանի որ թարգմանության վրա ժամանակ
Իցիվա երկու րոպե բավական է
As is the common.
I only need 2 minutes right now.
Բայց հետո րոպե ես պետք է
But
խոսեմ
then I will talk for 5 minutes.
There is a 5-minute section at the end of this, towards the end of this meeting, where she can address general comments.
Այս անդման վերջում 5 րոպեանոց հատված կա երբ որ դուք
Եղավ, հիմա քիչ է
Okay, I will only speak a little right now.
Ես հավաբիտ եմ Բայկ Բոյելի հետ, որ պարաբեցիկ ես կաչու Fire Department-ի բեկեդատ հետը գալիս է լրիվ ատեղի տեղը
I agree with Mike Boyle that when you call paramedics, you actually also get a fire truck, which isn't necessary.
Դայվավադը շատ լավ է աշխատում Դայվավադի օպերատորները շատ լավ են աշխատում Երբ որ զանգահարում ես իսկույն ուղարկում են ակապոլիս եթե պետք է
The operators of Daivavadi are working properly. When you call them, they respond promptly.
Բայց որոշ փոլիսներ, եթե երկու փոլիս ես այդ պատմել եմ դրանց մոտ կանգնած են, տատիրուհիս կաչում է երրորդին, ասում է ես մարդ եմ ծեծել, այդ երրորդ փոլիսից թիքեթա տալի, որ ես ահռելի իձանից բոյով մարդուն ծեծել եմ։ Բայց փոլիսը չի մտածում, եթե այստեղ փոլիս է կանգնած երկու հատ, ոնց ես կին, իվալիդ կին կարող եմ ծեծեմ ուրիշին։ Всё։
I've had an instance when there were 2 police officers present for a certain case, and then someone called the third I called the third officer, and then they ended up giving me a ticket for beating up someone that was much bigger than me, and I also have a disability. And I want to mention the fact that there were 2 police officers already present there, so I don't understand why I was the one getting the ticket while there were already 2 police officers present.
Հետո էր բիբատ, ես կխտրեմ police department-ը զբաղվի դրանով, որ այս սյուները սվաստիկայով Glendale Broadway-ից միջև Broadway brand վերացնեք, իրանք ձեզ դիմեն, որ այդ սվաստիկան վերացնեք։
And then I will ask the police department to do something about the swastikas that we have on the poles from Glendale to Glendale Broadway,
Glendale Bread,
and Glendale and Brand.
Այդ հատվածը։
Just that section.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that's all the cards I have on this. So there's no action. This is basically to note and file the information received by the 2 department chiefs regarding possible actions in case the UUT tax is eliminated from the city's budget revenue stream. So, Mr. Garpecha.
Yes, thank you. As Mr. Mayor indicated, there is no action being taken tonight. This is just a report. And I asked for this report because the public was asking, why don't you go to county? Why don't you go to the county? And we had nothing to compare our city to other cities that are contracting out with county. And this is a very comprehensive, detailed report. I want to thank you for providing this. And I talked to some of my friends who are council members in contract cities. They're okay with it, but they say exactly what Mr. Watson indicated, local control, the prices changing not without notice, but without their control. So, and the level of service that is being provided to them. So, again, there's no action being taken today. This report is on the website. Everybody can go on there and take a look at it and see if they have any different opinions. And one other thing I wanted to mention was on the report on page 64, when it says language at home, that 40% which is Indo-European, they mean Armenians. It doesn't say Armenians because we're considered
Indo-European. It's the census, right? Yes, sir.
So it's the census report. So if you look at it, a lot of people are, not a lot, few people called me on this because of the census report. There's no mention of the Armenians in this report. We're considered Indo-European. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, is there a motion to note and file?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We need roll on this, or can we do it by acclamation?
Each do a roll.
Let's take a roll, please.
Councilmember Devine.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Garpetian.
Yes.
Sinanian.
Yes.
Mayor Najarian.
Yes. Okay, settle down over there, Mr. City Manager. Thank you, Mr. City Clerk. Let's go to item 8B.
Director of Community Development regarding update on Space 134 Freeway Cap Park proposal. Motion to note, B1, motion to note and file Space 134 2016 Vision Plan update. B2, authorize issuance of Space 134 Phase 3 technical feasible study RFP. 3, authorize professional services agreement with Melendrez for on-call services related to the Space 134 project in the amount not to exceed $45,000.
Do we have a clicker? Oh, sorry, I have it. Yes, sir. To the extent that the beat does go on, as we saw with the recent victory in the redevelopment case, as you see in the upcoming challenge on UUT, we expect that residents will decide for themselves what is the best course of action, and in doing so, we have to continue to move forward with different projects, priorities, and the vision of the City Council overall. So with that in mind, we'd like to give you the latest installment and update as to where we are on this very momentous and ambitious project. So with that, we'll have our Deputy Director of Community Development, Alan Loomis, give you an overview of where we are with the report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. City Manager, members of the Council, Mr. Mayor. Space 134 this is the second time you're seeing this project. It came to the Council approximately 18 months ago. It is so named because the project site is the 134 freeway as it cuts across Glendale and basically is running in a trench through much of its path through Glendale. That meaning it's below grade and surface streets, Central, Brand, Louise, Jackson, Glendale, et cetera, are crossing over the street essentially as bridges, but the freeway is basically in a trench. The project, in a nutshell, is to build a cap park. That is a cap park with a P, not a cat park. P-lines. A cap park is the idea that with this freeway where it's in a trench, you'd effectively put a roof on the freeway. The freeway, therefore, becomes a tunnel. And on top of that roof, you could build a park that would basically be at the same level as the city streets. Sounds like a fanciful idea for sure, and it's not quite as easy to do this as just giant hands dropping pieces of cardboard on top of the freeway, but it has been done around the country. Most notably, Seattle has had this for many, since the 70s, and a couple of other examples in Seattle. There's one in Phoenix, there's one in San Diego, there's a fairly recent one in Dallas, which is a real case study for what we might consider doing in Glendale. And then, of course, there is a relatively small cap park called Memorial Park in La Canada, Flint Ridge that bridges over the 210 freeway. Most people don't even recognize it when you're on the freeway. It just looks like a very large bridge, but there's in fact a park over the freeway up in La Canada, Flint Ridge. So Space 134, the project, this is the second round of work that we've done on it. Both this round and the previous round have been funded by grants from the Southern California Association of Governments. So we want to thank them for their modest financial support for this. And I also want to thank one of the SCAG members who came and sat through last week's presentation to get credit for his work. But then, of course, we moved the item to tonight. I don't believe he's here. The second phase of work has been focused on some community outreach. We've had a couple of fun events. Partially, one of them was with the Earth Day event. We've done a couple of kind of interesting community outreach meetings, and I know some of the council members have attended those and participated in those meetings, in which we've asked community members who've come what they sort of think of this particular project and would they be willing to support it. And based on the surveys and feedback we've received, you can see these are some of the words and terms that people suggest they'd like to see in such a park. And with a little bit more systematic sort of checklist format, you can see this bar chart sort of reflects community desires for particular kinds of programming or sort of features such as farmers market or play areas, bicycle stations, a lot of interest actually in a sculpture garden, which is somewhat surprising to the team. What we have found by doing this work, these outreach events over the past year, is that there is pretty broad support for this kind of project. This, of course, is not a systematic survey. This is based on the surveys of people who've attended these sorts of events. But you can see roughly 75% of people attending these events are supportive of this project. and also supportive of this project incorporating some sort of transit that would sort of connect between Glendale, Burbank, Pasadena, or some other destinations. So our design team, which has been Melendra's landscape architects and urban planners, came up with this vision. And this perspective view, you're sort of floating in a helicopter over the city looking towards the southeast. So the freeway is running as it heads up. The top of the screen there is headed off towards Eagle Rock and Pasadena. West and towards Burbank is the freeway going to the bottom. So north is on your left, south is on your right. And so the project is currently conceived would potentially be up to 24 acres between Central and somewhere around the Geneva-Balboa crossing. And this scheme and design is very conjectural because it really hasn't been involved through a really extensive community design process that our Parks Department typically engages, but it reflects some of the sort of program features that people have expressed some interest in. And the design team has really come up with two different sort of components to this. One that they call the Heart. That's located really around Brandon Central and is much more civic oriented. That's where probably the event space kind of concert pavilions would be, kind of in the heart of the kind of high-rise district. And going east from there out towards Glendale Avenue is the part they call the Soul, and that would be much more neighborhood-oriented parks with sort of playgrounds and features that community member be more neighborhood-oriented and less of sort of like a sort of downtown destination park. This strategy of the sort of two different sort of the Heart and Soul sets into a kind of idea of sort of phasing the project. This is obviously a very expensive undertaking. And so we would think of the Heart, which would be phase one between Brandon Central, and as you can see on the graphic here, that would be somewhere around a 4 to 5 acre park. It's roughly about 0.2 miles the freeway would be covered. And by benchmark comparison, this is roughly the same size as the park that's been built in Dallas. Dallas Clyde Warren Park is $120 million in today's dollars. It opened in 2012. So their actual costs are a little bit less expensive, but accounting for inflation, that's kind of the price tag. By way of comparison, of course, I think it was mentioned previously, the Americana is well over that price tag in terms of its cost. So $120, $150 million sounds very expensive, but in the scheme of big infrastructure projects, it's actually relatively inexpensive. Moving on, the future phases, the sort of Soul portion, the neighborhood portion, this could be built all at once or in a series of sort of individual pieces as funding comes online, and that would expand the park by potentially up to 20 acres. So just visually, what would this look like? This is the downtown portion between Brandon Central. Here you're sort of above Brand Boulevard, looking west towards Central. And so there's a couple of pavilions there. These could represent restaurants. They could represent sort of stages. One of them also potentially represents access to some sort of transit link that's on the freeways below this park. And then the neighborhood portion here, as you can see, is a little bit more green and more focused on sort of the passive space of somebody flying a kite. There is a red bear that represents a sculpture. That's what that is. If you've ever been to Denver, they have a very large blue bear sculpture. I think that's what the design team sort of copied that and made it red to represent Glendale. I guess that's maybe our famous bear. There's also some playing courts represented in the background. But again, these graphics and this sort of park design is very conjectural as we move forward. If we move forward in future design phases and technical feasibility studies, and more public outreach, this design would obviously get very refined to really accurately reflect community interest. I mentioned a transit link. And as the mayor and many of the council knows, Metro is actually looking at sort of connecting some sort of bus rapid transit between Pasadena and North Hollywood, Burbank. Recently launched a pilot service, so we've been very cognizant of that strategy. And so the park project is actually being designed so that it can incorporate any potential transit linkages that Metro ultimately pursues, including light rail. Potentially running at the freeway surface. So we're not closing the door on any of these options and always trying to make sure the park project would work with any new transit connections that might come forward out of Metro. As I mentioned, there's a fairly decent price tag on this. So a big part of our work in this current phase has been to look at a sort of very high level kind of economic model for this. And what we did is we looked at other cap park projects or similar projects, Clyde Warren in Dallas being obviously the best example, but also the ones in Phoenix, the Millennium Park in Chicago, which is actually built entirely over railroad tracks. It's near the Art Museum. So what we found is that, first of all, cities don't build these things on their own. They're very expensive, and so there's always, to construct these, a partnership at the state, the federal, or the county levels with the transit agencies to fund the construction of these projects, to actually build the infrastructure. And then more importantly, what we found is that to be able to operate these in a very successful fashion, it's also a partnership, and usually with local interests. Clyde Warren Park in particular, their operating budget is substantively funded with philanthropy. So there's usually a nonprofit Friends of kind of group that is set up that actually is a receivership for corporate donations and other kind of wealthy donations that helps to fund the ongoing operations of the park, usually through some sort of endowment. And that's been a very important thing. Clyde Warren, they actually sort of seeded the first 2 years of operations money when they built the park so they could kind of get it up and running and then sort of open the park and then have nothing to do with it. So we've looked at the operating costs from that perspective and then sort of begin to sort of think, could Glendale actually afford to do such a project like this? And the preliminary results we have, and again, it's a very high-level economic study, is that, yes, it seems feasible. It's feasible to imagine we can reach there, but we obviously have a lot more kind of analysis and work to do from that economic standpoint and, of course, from the funding standpoint of it. So our next steps, if the council would like to continue to pursue this, is that, first of all, the current phase of work with SCAG has been completed with this presentation and the report you have, the more detailed report you have in your council packet. We're completed with the first phase of the SCAG work. So we're asking you to simply note and file the current presentation. If you'd like to move forward with this project, we'd recommend moving forward with a technical feasibility study. We've prepared a request for proposals. With the council's approval, we will issue that request for proposals. That technical feasibility study would be focused on primarily the traffic flow, trying to figure out how exactly this project might impact or potentially improve some of the traffic flow on the on-ramps and off-ramps at the freeway, integrate with Metro's current studies for transit link, east-west transit link. We'd also end up looking at some of the sort of high-level kind of engineering schematics in terms of, if we're going to build this, does this mean shutting down a portion of the freeway? Do we have to move the embankments out? Do we have to impact the current bridges? We don't have answers to those questions yet, but we have a design in place that we now can begin to analyze those kinds of questions. We've certainly heard, as we've talked to community members, that's obviously their number one concern about this project. Their second, not necessarily in order, but some of their other concerns have to do with air quality impacts. You're building a park over a freeway, what's those air quality impacts? What kind of noise impacts might it have? There's been a lot of questions raised about how are you going to provide for parking for if we're going to build a destination park, people will drive there, they'll park, are they going to be in the neighborhoods? So some of these kinds of questions we don't have answers for. The technical feasibility study would begin to sort of dive into those questions. Probably not answer them at the level of a full-blown environmental impact report, but again, we could begin to start benchmarking and figuring out how other cities that pursue these projects, how they have answered those sorts of questions. So the technical feasibility study, if you give us the okay to move forward, we would bring the winning team back to you for approval of their contract and expect to have their work completed in roughly a year. Funding for this project is actually part of the Measure R allocations that the city has. It's actually specifically geared towards evaluating improvements to the on and off ramps of the freeway, so it's a major component of what we'd be looking at. The third element of this project, or moving forward, we request is that you approve a continuing services contract with Melendres. As I said, Melendres is the landscape and planning team that has worked with us on both phases of the project with SCAG. They won 2 competitive RFPs, so they've been hand in hand with city staff throughout this entire project. So we have a modest request for a $45,000 contract, which is part of the department's budget. It's already been approved by council. We have the funding available in our contractual services. We'd like to maintain an on-call relationship with Melendres. So, for example, if we've been asked to go to another community presentation, and we have to revise this presentation, these graphics, prepare a new slide presentation. They're available to do that. They've also been representing the city at SCAG. SCAG has an ongoing freeway cap park coalition. It's made up of Santa Monica, Ventura, downtown LA, Hollywood, other cities in the region that SCAG is helping them pursue these kinds of projects. They meet on about a quarterly basis. Melendrez's office is right next door to SCAG, so we've oftentimes said, why don't you go represent us, because it's too much effort for city staff to take 2 hours out of the day or 3 hours out of the day to drive downtown for one of these meetings. So the contract with Melendrez would be on an on-call basis. This would obviously also preclude Melendrez from being part of any team that would compete for the technical feasibility study. Everything that we've presented is available online on this website, space134.net, including this current presentation and the latest round of graphics. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
First, a very stylish and clear PowerPoint. Thank you. It's very inspirational as well. I know that there's a couple of competing cap parks. You reference them in your PowerPoint in Hollywood. So what are our chances, and how does that work? Is there going to be, do you think, one cap park in Los Angeles County financed, or so are we going to be in competition, or is it possible that all of them get financed, and how do we rise to the top?
That's a very good question. Hollywood is probably is the furthest along. They're engaged in some form of environmental impact report. I believe it's a program level impact report as opposed to a project level. I don't think they've figured out exactly how they're going to, all the construction costs. I think they're just looking at it at a very kind of high level. So they're the furthest along, and they claim to have donors lined up to help fund it. There's also a project called Park 101 that's in downtown LA. Near the Civic Center, sort of the connection between City Hall and Alvarez Street Union Station. I haven't heard much about them having a lot of momentum behind that project. It appeared in one of the renderings I saw for the LA Olympics proposal as being part of one of the event spaces. Santa Monica has periodically looked at this concept on and off. The latest I've heard is that they're off. And Ventura is looking at it. And I think Ventura is in some ways similar to us, although Ventura is a smaller city and sort of has less resources to bring to bear, and is, of course, outside of LA Metro. Ventura is trying to do this in conjunction with an upgrade to their Metrolink station, so they're trying to hinge it on transportation dollars. And I think if Metro moves forward with the east-west corridor study and begins to turn that outside of a study into a project, there's some chance that we can get the seed money as part of building a station here that could begin to leverage other funds for us to move forward. So I don't think there's a competition per se, that there's only one cap park in the region. But.
Mr. Simon?
So one of the things that we're asked to do today is to authorize the issuance of the RFP for the feasibility study. Now, what would the feasibility study cost, and where would the funding come from?
We currently have approximately $300,000 programmed as part of Measure R allocation to the city.
So Measure R money, $300,000.
Right, and specifically sort of part of the pot of money that looks at highway operations.
And you think 300 would be enough for a project of this size?
We're going to issue the RFP in kind of an a la carte menu, so there are some features that we may be able to fund with other with maybe another SCAG grant, for example, or other pots of money, or some things that are less critical to our first analysis. So that's kind of the way we want to approach it. So we'll put it out there, see what the price tag comes in, but there's a certain kind of core element really focused on the sort of traffic and freeway on and off ramp analysis that we think is like the kind of key thing to look at right now.
And if, let's say the RFP, all the results come back much in excess of $300,000, are there more non-earmarked Measure R monies that we can go after?
We potentially could look at going back to Metro and asking them if they would sort of shift money around, and we'd probably have to renegotiate some of our funding agreements with them, but we could potentially go back to Metro. As I said, we might look at augmenting this with another SCAG grant. SCAG seems very interested in funding these studies across the region. So,
and I anticipate people saying, expressing their concerns, saying, listen, this is a really ambitious project that's very expensive, if there are monies like that out there, shouldn't you be using it for something more, I don't know, realistic or tangible? And how would we respond to that? I mean, I have my own responses, but I'd like to hear Mr. Ochoa.
Certainly, I think there's two kind of responses. One, I think as a community and as an organization, it's important to have moonshots. It's important to have a vision around an ambitious project that folks can rally around to say, okay, if they always asked when Willie Sutton why he robbed banks, he said that's where the money is. Right? To the extent that people think about open space in central and southern Glendale, it just isn't there. You've said it many times before. We're built out. So why would you build a park here over the freeway? Well, that's where space is. I mean, as Alan points out, this is a trench that exists today. It is ambitious, but the cost, while there's initial sticker shock, you come to realize there's $500 million constructed down the street. I think that's something that it can make sense and would serve the larger area. In terms of the money, I think your point is very well taken. This council has been very direct about what you expect to see in terms of existing city and projected city resources. Those resources, be they DIF or capital improvement dollars, aren't earmarked for this type of project. I think our scan of the horizon has to be for those public-private partnerships, EB5 money, opportunities to monetize the investment that will go around this area, perhaps. When the state killed redevelopment, they said, we're going to allow you to do infrastructure improvement districts, which is basically tax increment financing, and it's redevelopment by another name. And we could set up such a district in the area to the north of, in the north end of our downtown, to allow the folks that will see the greatest benefit, that incremental revenue that comes off of their properties, to flow back to a project like this, not in competition with DIF money's existing parks or projected parks. So it operates on two levels. One, the hearts and minds in terms of wanting that moonshot, and the other, keeping one foot rooted in reality to say that money has to come from somewhere, but it's important that it doesn't come from the general fund today.
Right. And also, wouldn't it be true in general sense that the kind of money that we may be able to get for this project is not the same money that would go towards sort of the more conventional transportation-oriented projects? Meaning there is money out there that's sitting for a CAP project as opposed to just for another bus transit project.
I think that point's well taken. Certainly, Mr. Najarian can speak even more to it. But the idea that there are many pots of categorical money that exist, and you hear folks bemoan pedestrian money or bicycle money. Well, folks, that's all that money can be spent for.
Right.
If you can find a connection to a project like this, well, then so be it. If you find a nickel on the floor, pick it up and spend it on something that 76% of the community want. What's not to love about that? And it seems to me that this council is being aggressive in leveraging the mandate given to you by the community.
Thank you.
Yes, you mentioned EB5 money. You think EB5 funds will invest in such a project?
I think that there are lots of different funds, particularly for infrastructure projects supported by local levels of government. That is a real opportunity.
With EB5, they have to have some kind of return on their investment. So what would be their return on their investment?
There are sites, underutilized sites in the arena, in the area around this particular project. And if you look at the elongated project, the full 24 acres, I think there are lots of opportunities for somebody to invest in a site, increase the value of it, and realize a significant return on investment. But we will know that as we get closer. I know Council is anxiously anticipating participation in the public-private partnership, the P3 conference upcoming, where you'll hear lots of different ideas about ways to do that. I can put it this way, sir. There won't be any one source of money that will get you everything that you need.
Right. So the first phase is about 0.2 miles, and the second phase is about half a mile, right? So altogether is about...
Yeah, maybe up to 3/4 of them. Yeah, half a mile. Yeah, total would be about 3/4 of a mile.
So we're not building a 710 tunnel in here, because you said when you cap the freeway, becomes a tunnel. So it's a very short stretch. So we're not basically building something similar to 710 that is
and we'd
proposed right now.
Correct, and we'd actually even look in the next phase at maybe there should be an air gap between two of the streets so that One of the questions is how long does this get before you have to have mechanical venting? And then you have to operate those mechanical vents and maintenance on them. It'd be nice to do this in a fashion that isn't necessary.
That is what the feasibility study.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, it is, we've used the word ambitious structurally and financially. This is a huge project. But I have to say that of all of the issues that I've been dealing with since I've taken this spot on the dais, this particular project has gotten more positive reactions from the residents than anything we've done. I'd say 99.9% of the emails that I've received are in favor of moving forward on this particular project. I think it's really important that 3 of us plus staff are going to Dallas this coming week. Sunday we're leaving, but to look at this park, to experience this Kyle Warner, was it Kyle Warren? Kyle Warren Park, to experience it, to see it, and to also learn at this conference how we can move forward with this public-private partnership so that we can hopefully work together to get the funds for this project. So I think it's a great way of bringing the community together. Someone wrote me an email, and I have to quote this because I thought it was such a great analogy. He said that the 134 is ripping our city apart, and this cap is a way of stitching us back together again, to connecting us, to, it will give us, there are so many positives about this particular project that it's like, and I was so impressed at that $150 million, and you're saying it's not an outrageous amount for a project like this. 120 million? Oh, I thought he said 150. But anyway, I was.
Get $30 million.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
but anyway, I appreciate that, and as I say, in order to make a decision, a big decision like this, we have to gather all the information that we can to make an educated decision. So I think it's really important what we're about to do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. It's very ambitious, I have to say. But the issues that I have are that the funding we're using is Measure R funding. This is our regional equity fund. Of all this discussion, I haven't heard one sentence devoted to how we're going to make transportation any better on the freeways. There was some reference to a transit line, but I have to tell you, this is similar to when Mayor Garcetti said, I'm going to use my transportation money to build affordable housing because it's near a transit stop. It wasn't very well received. I think we're overstepping. I'll be honest with you. That pool of money we have isn't just someone's nickel that dropped on the ground. That's our pot of money that we have for all of our transportation needs because we're not getting any more. How is this making congestion less on the 134? Is it solving any of our interchange problems? We've got numerous ways that we can use that.
Mr. Mayor.
I just say, I don't think we're being honest with ourselves when we say that this is for transportation purposes, wink, wink, nod, nod.
If I may, Mr. Mayor,
yeah.
It's a very good point, and thank you for the opportunity to clarify that. One of the major pieces of this project that's been discussed in the past is the idea of one-way frontage roads to connect the various freeway on and off ramps to allow some of the queuing operations that are, as people are leaving Brand or Central, queuing to get on those streets as they're waiting for the meters to open up on the freeways. A big part of what we'd be looking at in this technical feasibility study from a traffic analysis perspective is, can we create those frontage roads, and then if we run traffic models on them, do they get delivered the kind of congestion relief we'd like to see?
Haven't we done that already? I remember studies we've done for the frontage roads all along the freeway, and they weren't that old.
We did.
Why are we redoing the investigation?
We did studies and alignments of frontage roads about 10 years ago as we sort of developed a downtown mobility plan. But what we didn't do is do a deeper kind of traffic analysis on those to see what sort of congestion relief they might bring to the table. And as part of this project, as we've explored it, we've come up with a few other ideas about how we could run frontage roads, including extending the ramps deeper into the freeway main line. So those are some of the questions we'd like to look at with this technical feasibility study and see whether they do have any benefit or not. They may be very expensive and very little benefit. Right. So,
well, this is very exciting. It's very fun. It's very well supported by residents who want extra park space. I guess I'm just saying let's not get too carried away. Let's be very realistic about costs. And when you compare this cost to the Americana, I don't think that's an appropriate comparison because the Americana has a completely different purpose. Let's compare this to Rockhaven or any other area where we've looked at park space. Let's just be very sober. Let's keep our sobriety about this issue. I'm not throwing a wet blanket on it. I said I wouldn't do that. But please, I urge us all to keep in mind the cost and the steps that we might take that lead us down a path that might be too far. We might go too far and not be able to turn around and sink good money where we could otherwise make tangible and relatively immediate improvements to our park space situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Mr. Mayor, you're saying that $300,000 will be basically the cost of feasibility study. That's what we're guessing. And how much of the Measure R funds do we have in our accounts right now? How much of that fund is left in our account?
Well, there's quite a bit of money, well over that. But most of it is actually earmarked to Mr. Galanian's projects to actually do
transportation,
improve the roadways. There's really only two parts of that, only two components of those funds there for feasibility studies right now.
So there are some Measure R money for transportation projects as well that hasn't been spoken for.
Most of the money has been programmed in our kind of work with Metro for specific projects.
Okay, and the $300,000 is we're not de-obligating any other projects.
Metro has agreed to fund a kind of analysis called Space 134, focused on the on and off ramps and the kind of freeway alignment conditions in Glendale.
Okay. So, and the mayor, you're saying that this project may not improve any of our transportation issues that we have as far as 134 congestion or the on ramps and off ramps. Am I hearing you right?
I'm saying I hope that the studies that we do are primarily focused on relieving transportation and traffic issues, having this park as an ancillary benefit as opposed to the other way around, because I think we might run into trouble if we start designing a park and look for transportation benefits as opposed to looking for transportation benefits and finding an opportunity to do some park space creation.
The point and the emphasis is well taken, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, because with a project like this, I think you mentioned it already, that parking is going to be the most important issue. And I want to drive down there and use the park. Where am I going to park? A lot of people walk from different neighborhoods that are close by, but I think in our study, I hope they will address that really well, because that would add to the problems that we have on those intersections that, we have heavy traffic on, especially at the rush hour time.
So let's hear from the speaker, and then we can discuss the options that we're presented with and decide which way we're going to go. Mike Mohill.
Evening, Mayor and Nigerian Council members. My name is Mike Mohill. Mayor and Nigerian Council members, how do you spell the words pie in the sky? That's what we have here. Mayor Nigerian, you and I agree. We don't even have enough money to fund Rockhaven last week. But we're going to find millions of dollars for a pie in the sky object. And let's not forget, come this summer, we're going to be needing another $38 to $50 million more to pay CalPERS because they didn't make their investment quotas. And how about the $1.6 billion bond debt? And the $440 million unfunded pension obligations? Those come first before you do any type of park plans. So why spend your time wasting the taxpayers' money on a project? All you're doing is giving our city workers a job. Give that money to me and the people who are unemployed or the people on disability. They'd rather have the 100,000 million, whatever the pie in the sky number is. What are we spending our wheels? Pie in the sky. Pie in the sky. Oh, it's not. You know what? Can someone buy me a trip to Europe? I'd like to go. Why not? Residents like to have a park. So would I. You like to have money. You know, you promised the residents up there in Montrose, Rock Haven, then when you approved it, that you're going to find the money to maintain it, make it a museum, make it a park, and all of a sudden now you don't have any money. Promises made, promises not kept. And here we are tonight making promises, letting the people in the viewing audience think, oh, we're going to have this wonderful park over a freeway and smell the fumes of the freeway. Wow. And then when you measure our money, we're going to create a need that this is a transportation thing. What a joke. You're supposed to be leaders of the community? To even contemplate this kind of money, this idea, is an embarrassment. I would think somebody in junior high would think of this pie in the sky idea. But you're adults. You're supposed to be the leaders of the city, and you're supposed to know finances. Mr. Carpathian, you're a businessman. You know the difference between minus and plus. Does anybody else? Mr. Ochoa knows the difference, and he hasn't said a word. Why are we even talking about this pie in the sky? People love lots of nice things. I'd like to have a trip to Europe. I can't afford it. I'd like to have a brand new car. I can't afford it. But we're going to create jobs for our city employees because they need the money to have a job. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ochoa, what are we, so can you bracket our options here on this item?
Yeah.
What are the alternatives that we're presented with?
Well, we're asking you to accept this report because that was the original grant that we had. We're asking you to authorize the issuance of the RFP that was described by Mr. Loomis, and we're asking that you allow us to execute an agreement with Melendrez, the consultant, on an as-needed basis at a not-to-exceed number. I believe it's $45,000, so that way we can consult as needed only on technical issues as they come up during the issuance or during the RFP period or even during the evaluation period.
So may I mean, it was referenced that we have 3 council members going to Dallas to attend the P3 Public-Private Partnership Seminar, as well as inspecting the Clyde Warren Bridge. Can we, would anyone entertain the motion to continue this and to hear back from you folks on your findings, observations, get some firsthand information as to costing, maintenance, importance to the community?
It's entirely the
Or
council.
do you want to just?
No, I'm fine with that. I'll make that motion.
Your comments.
Bring it
will
back
be
on the 22nd?
Upon their return. How's our schedule look on the 22nd?
Not bad.
Well, we wouldn't have to go through the full report. I mean, we heard that. This would be more to hear from my colleagues on funding opportunities. That's one of the issues that we all touched on, as well as the functionality of this park and perhaps some other ideas that they may have learned and observed. How does that grab you, Mr. City Manager? How about you guys?
That sounds good to me.
Is there any time-sensitive parameters with?
No.
Okay, I'll make that motion.
Okay, to continue to the 22nd, to hear firsthand
Right. We go visit the park as well.
from our council delegation.
If you hate it, make sure you tell us.
Believe me.
Rain.
Well, let me sort of expand on that. The issue you brought up was parking. How are they handling the parking? How is transit handled? What sort of uses do they have on it?
I looked at it. They have water feature on it.
Well, that's what I want to hear.
I'll tell you that.
I can't go. But
Do they have a bear?
I checked it on the internet. I have water
so you
feature.
guys come back and share your thoughts and observations. I think that might help the discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so there was a motion. Was there a second to continue? Do we need a roll call on that?
Right. You don't. You can continue it to,
okay,
to
so
that
let's,
day.
without objection, let's continue it to the 22nd. Thank you very much. Next item, please.
Director of Public Works regarding proposals submitted in response to the RFP for consulting services to provide recommendations and guidance regarding the franchising of commercial refuse collection within the City of Glendale. 1, motion authorizing the city manager or his designee to award a professional service agreement, PSA, to Stearns, Conrad, and Schmidt Consulting Engineering, Incorporated, doing business as SCS Engineers in the amount of $265,010 with a contract contingency of $26,501 and rejecting all other proposals. 2, resolution of appropriation.
Mr. Ochoa.
This is a very brief report from Mr. Galani and Mr. Hargrove talking about the next step in approaching our zero waste policy by looking at new dynamics on the commercial waste hauling sector. So with that, Rubik.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of City Council, as a way of introduction, in July of 2003, we issued a formal notification letter to all the private waste haulers in the City of Glendale, informing them of our intention to implement a franchise system for the collection of solid waste from commercial establishments, as well as multifamily residential buildings with 5 or more units.
Was it our intent or just a reservation of right to do so?
You have to give the 10-year notice under state law.
Right. Okay.
5-year notice, yes.
Oh, 5 year, I'm sorry.
Notice. Okay.
5-year notice.
So these primarily are for the establishments and the buildings that we currently don't serve. The City of Glendale Integrated Waste Management doesn't serve. And they were allowed to operate and provide these services for 5 years. So the earliest opportunity that we can implement such a franchise system would be July of 2018. Because of the legal complexities and the large number of alternatives available for a franchise system, we are recommending to retain the services of a qualified consultant to assist us with evaluating the alternative models, to prepare the franchising RFP, to assist us in the evaluation and selection of the franchise proposals, and help us prepare the required environmental review documents. As Mr. Ochoa mentioned, this effort is a significant step towards achieving our goals, the goals of the zero waste policy in the city. And with that, I will ask Mr. Dan Hargrove, our Deputy Director of Public Works, to briefly talk about our zero waste policy and what's contained in there, as well as the comprehensive competitive selection process we undertook to recommend to you SCS Engineers as the consultant to help us in this endeavor. With us today, Michelle Leonard from SCS Engineers, available if you have any questions of her. With that, Dan.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. As Mr. Galanian said, I am here to kind of give a little background in terms of our move to franchise and how that fits with the city's objectives, namely the zero waste plan, which was implemented in December of 2011. This, as the council is aware, is the plan where we move from the mentality of cradle to grave in terms of our waste. Meaning I have a cup of coffee, I take the sip of the coffee, I finish the cup, and I throw it in the trash can, to cradle to cradle, reuse, reduction, or recycling of that byproduct of my coffee for some other purpose. We have key objectives that we're pursuing to achieve that in the form of diversion being all those bottles and cans and mattresses put together, and those are to achieve 75% diversion diversion in 2020 and to achieve 90% diversion by 2030. This is aligned with the state's goals as well. Where we stand today, just to give you the current situation, is at 63% diversion. And that balance will go up and down based upon programs we implement and impacts to our operations.
Can I ask, what is Los Angeles or Pasadena, kind of what are surrounding cities' current diversion rates?
They vary, and I don't know specifically right now, but I'd say we are above average, I think.
Can you get that to me?
Certainly.
And is this 63% that includes residential as well, or is just residential?
This is actually all the waste generated in the city of the Glendale, which I will cover a little bit. It's both what we collect as a city operation as well as the private haulers working in the city. So how does commercial franchise program align with the city's zero waste goals? Basically, the franchise is a key tool in us gaining control over the city's waste stream and how much of it is diverted. Particularly now with legislation being what it is, there's a lot more demands from the state. One of the key waste streams that we want to manage better is to control the organics and food waste, which needs to now be diverted, recycled, and which both the city programs and the private programs that we're responsible for. We as a city are, as I mentioned previously, have a responsibility to any waste that is disposed of in the city is Glendale waste. And Cal Recycle, the state agency that oversees us, we submit an annual report to, and they audit us based upon our diversion rates. So here's our current system. We have one of the last cities in the region that has an open permit system. 75% of the 88 municipalities in the region have moved to some sort of variation on a franchise. Currently, we have about 50 permitted haulers that are private haulers that are working in the city. Their accounts include 10% of all of our multifamily dwellings and 85% of all of our commercial establishments.
And that is critically important because with 50 permitted haulers, it is extraordinarily difficult and damn near impossible to understand everything that they're doing and disposing of in the name of Glendale.
So,
absolutely. Is that your question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, when you say 10% of multifamily dwellings, who takes care of the rest of the 90%?
City.
The city does? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and the 15% of the commercial accounts are city accounts. So, but the private haulers account for 30% of our total annual waste. Again, as mentioned previously, AB 939 mandates the city is responsible for that waste. The waste generated in the city is Glendale's. Now, the difficulty for us as a city to get information from those private haulers is we're also seen as a competitor by the private haulers, and they're not very forthcoming with providing that information. How we've done this annually is we have a consultant audit the private haulers and try to glean and get the information they can, which kind of leads to some of the challenges with this open permit system, the first of which being the lack of accountability that the private haulers, the permitted haulers, have to the city, seen as a competitor. You don't have Pepsi willingly offering up their gross profits and new products to Coca-Cola. So there's a resistance to that. Also, we have limited control on mandating diversion, regulatory and recycling programs that they're supposed to be undertaking relative to the state regulations. Even things like clean vehicles. Well, all of our fleet is CNG vehicles. We have very difficult time mandating and regulating these private haulers in the city. And then the impacts of these multiple vehicles on our city streets in terms of pollution, traffic, noise. I always think of Montrose Mall in this regard. I believe we have 11 private haulers servicing Montrose Mall, and you can imagine any given Tuesday, 11 different trucks driving over the same alleyways.
With 11 different bins that are out there. Some are shared, some aren't, some pay for trash, some don't. And it contributes to some of the litter that you see out in the streets and in the alleyways, not just in Montrose, but around the city.
And the pickup days cannot be all the same. They may be different days.
And
that creates a lot of issues in multi-residential neighborhoods, and
So,
they have
yeah.
trash pickup almost every day, and it creates a huge issue for them because they bring the bins out and put it on the side.
Some property owners will have a very conscientious and commensurate level of service, 3-yard bin 3 times a week. Somebody else may not want to pay for that, so they'll do a 3-yard bin maybe 2 times a week when they really should have 3. That trash has to go somewhere.
Getting back to kind of the core diversion idea, we have no flow control over the collected materials from these private haulers. The idea of a hauler that has 5 accounts in Burbank, 2 accounts in Glendale, 7 accounts in Eagle Rock, they go up to Shoal with their trash and say, oh, this is Glendale trash. Then we own that. We own that, everybody else's trash. And same thing with a nice load of recycling. That same private hauler may be picking up some wonderful recyclables and delivering it to someplace that we're not getting the diversion credit for. And then the other piece of this is the AB, there's no resources to offset how we administer and manage the AB 939 rules. So franchise system is the best solution to address an open permit deficiencies and better achieve compliance with state regulations, reporting requirements, and state diversion goals. Those are the conclusion of why franchise relative to zero waste. Mr. Galanian covered the idea of the requirements of a franchise implementation letter and the need to pursue a franchise consultant. So I'll move on to there. As far as our consultant selection, we did a very comprehensive evaluation criteria, really looking at value of the product we received from the various companies that participated, their experience, their adaptability, compatibility with the city. Was a key factor. Our rating panel was 5 individuals, 2 in-house city employees, and we also asked some neighboring communities who had raters from 2 communities, as well as a person representing professional affiliations of solid waste. Ultimately, our selection process was basically a 3-phase selection process. Phase one, really getting down to the quality, the experience. Phase 2 focused more on the dollars and cents piece, and the third phase being an interview process with the top competitors. Our recommendation is to council tonight is to proceed with an award to Stearns, Conrad, and Schmidt, SCS, consulting engineer, and the project director, again, Michelle Leonard, is here if council has any questions for her. Timeline, should council award the contract, we're ready to get started with the process as soon as possible. Reviewing SCS would review laws, regulations, both our local municipal ordinance as well as state regulation, what's existing, what's coming down the road, environmental review, public outreach and workshops, working with us to identify stakeholders and communicating and educating with these stakeholders relative to this process. Ultimately evaluating which franchise system is the right fit for Glendale. And then hopefully we can come back to council with in fall of this year with a recommendation for the type of franchise that we'd like to pursue, as well as revisions to our municipal code that is reflective of a open permit system. We need to transition our municipal code to reflect a franchise system. So we'll have CS will provide us with that background as well. With council's support, we would then move into the next phase, which is the RFP development for the franchisees to compete for, which we hope to bring back for authority in winter of 2017. Again, with your blessing, we move forward with the RFP review process and ultimately come back to council with recommendations in late spring of 2017. Consistent with the 5-year intent letter, we would the franchises plan to go into effect in August of 2018, right on time. And then SCS is not done with their scope of work. They would next conduct an audit of how our franchise system is working in the following year, in March of 2019. So with that, if there's any questions, either myself or Michelle, I'd be happy to answer them.
So,
Ms. Devine?
This is a 3-year contract, in other words, because they'll be working from now until 2018.
Yes, technically through
So
March
it's
20.
265 for 3 years.
For the scope of the work.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Councilmember Devine, that 3-year window is the best case scenario. It is common for the private haulers to ask for extension of that 5-year notification, so it has been done before. So if we need to, we can extend it.
So but will this cost hold for, no?
Because it's not based on time, but based on a fee. And I would like to add that this is a fee that staff has negotiated with SCS engineers.
Okay. Mr. Garbechian.
And what is the vision we have 50 haulers right now. We're going to franchise with how many haulers? What is the vision? Is it 2? Is it 10? Is it 5?
That would be that's one of the key factors we really want to look at in terms of the type of franchise. There's an exclusive franchise, which would be a competing for the entire city, a single hauler. You could have an exclusive multi-zone franchise where you have geographic locations that are set aside and competed for separately. And then there's a non-exclusive where you have a finite number of franchisees that can work anywhere within the community. So that's kind of the heart and soul of this analysis, is to determine what's the right fit for Glendale.
Councilmember Garpetian, as example, City of Los Angeles currently are negotiating their contracts. They will end up with 11 districts and 7 private haulers as franchisees. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, City of Santa Monica, there's no franchise, it's completely exclusive. The city provides all the pickup service for the entire city, commercial and residential.
In a little tiny city far out east, the city had non-exclusive haulers, a handful of them, and within the city, a geographically bound exclusive area, much like Montrose. So it'll be a mix and match of what the uses are, what the costs and benefits are, and the stakeholder element of this will be critically important, because you will hear from commercial and multifamily customers saying you're taking my choice away, or you're limiting my choice even, and that will be an education process in and of itself.
And like any other franchisors, are we going to charge franchise fees, or can we transfer this cost to them when they get awarded to become the franchisees?
You can charge a franchise fee, but that franchise fee has to be rooted in what the cost to administer the program is going to be.
One more time.
You can charge a franchise fee, but you are generally going to charge a fee that is rooted in the cost to administer the program.
That's it.
Unless you're going when you do that, you get closer to a challenge under Prop 218, Prop 26, where it becomes more of a tax if you go beyond what the cost is.
Okay, thank you.
Like our news rack issue.
Yes, much like a news rack issue.
Ms. Friedman.
Well, 2 things. First, just because we're hiring the consultant, it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to approve anything that the consultant comes back with. So I want to just make that clear. Hopefully we'll come back with choices and a range of choices and pros and cons, like you said. And secondly, I think it's really important when we go out with this RFP that we really highlight the city's desire to move towards that zero waste goal, and to find ways that we can work with the haulers to implement that. And I think there's a very important role for our commercial haulers to play in that, very important, one that they're not currently playing, and that we need to work with them to develop, with their association, with our sustainability people in-house. So I want that to be a specific area that the consultants really focus on. I know that you had that in your introduction, but that needs to be part of your rating panel, but not just that, but I would like the consultant to come back wrapped in with reasons to do this that involve traffic and efficiency and hygiene and all the things you said. I would like zero waste to be another component that they evaluate. How does this help or not help? And how do we build within whatever RFP we end up with a program for diversion that includes educating customers, programs to work with customers to train them for dealing with organics, for instance? How do we have compliance and ensure compliance with any private haulers? Are there penalties for non-compliance? All of that needs to be wrapped up. I don't know whether it's just the analysis or the RFP, but I suspect that the analysis itself needs to tell us which of the alternatives works best with our zero waste goal. So that's going to be something I'll be looking for when the consultant comes back with alternatives.
Councilmember Freeman, absolutely. That is a core goal for this process, is to look at that and into the really, if you the professional affiliations, the SWANA being this is a regional, this is a statewide issue, and there's some great minds working together to try to get our region, which is not necessarily as prepared as say up north, to transition to things like organic diversion. And so everyone is really kind of pulling together with this, and so this would be absolutely a core piece of what we want to bring back to you.
I have a couple questions. This is this is a highly competitive field, is it not? Municipal waste collection.
Mayor Najarian, absolutely.
Okay, so I think it's fair to say that any one of the main service providers are looking for the best chance to succeed. And I spoke to the city attorney with this. I'm not trying to be dramatic, but I did get an email from one of the unsuccessful proposers, Sour Grapes notwithstanding, who said that SCS does have a relationship with some of the private haulers, and therefore hiring SCS to prepare the RFP may give those haulers with whom they've worked a leg up in the creation and determination of the RFP. In other words, if they know that one of the haulers that they've worked with has a great MRF, municipal recycling facility, and does organics really well, then the organic recycling and the distance between here and the MRF may be a factor which may give a slight edge to that one or more waste haulers with whom they have the relationship with. Did you look at that at all? I mean, is that something that, first of all, is not true? Or is it true? Does SCS have any ongoing or previous relationship with any of the potential waste haulers in this?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, my experience in the industry and my conversation with Mr. Ochoa, who has far more experience, most of the consultants who work in this field have, in some form, shape, or capacity, worked with private haulers, because it's a huge industry, as you know. 3 out of the 4 consultants who proposed have all been working with private haulers. Not that they are affiliated, but in our opinion, that's an advantage that we can take advantage of. That's a plus that they have, so that they know how the system works, how the industry works. And to be honest, the selection, first of all, drafting the RFP and the components that go into the RFP is not determined by the consultant. The consultant just provides recommendation. It's the staff and ultimately your council who will make that decision. And for example, Councilmember Friedman's inclusion of her recommendations. And after going through the process, they will assist us with the analysis, but again, ultimately, it staffs the city manager and your decision as the selection of 1, 2, 3, or however number of private haulers that we can.
I will submit to you on that front that any complaint about this process is the very tip of the iceberg in terms of what you will see in the coming year and beyond. As you point out, this is extraordinarily competitive. This is a very large field of service providers, and my guess is that this will be one of the more challenging procurements that this city has ever done. And in fact, to the extent that it hasn't been done to date, the fact that you have 50 haulers is an indication that it couldn't have been done previously. It will be messy.
So I just want to add to your comments, even though we do have the ultimate decision, we do rely heavily on staff, especially in areas where it's not a item of common knowledge. I do not know how the waste hauling industry works, and I'm sure it is much more complicated than I can even imagine. So we do, it's not just a matter of, well, we're not making the decision, we're giving it to you guys. Well, we rely very heavily on staff's advice and, of course, the advice from the consultant. So my point then ultimately is it's critical that we not give even the appearance of impropriety or favoritism or tweaking the RFP to favor any particular hauler that has had any sort of relationship, good or bad, with the consultant. So
my guess is that you'll hear that complaint 7 ways from Sunday.
Okay, well, it started already. It's there right
regardless
out of the gate. Ms. Devine.
My last question. Is there any way that we can somehow safeguard our residents, commercial and residential, from any kind of sticker shock? Like when this comes through, when we decide, or when the franchise selections come in, that we've at least considered?
That's a great question, because you will get that from folks that maybe don't pay for service, or they split the service with their neighbor, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
To the extent, and here's where Glendale is very unique, and it's very beneficial that we're unique, to the extent that we have our own municipal solid waste operation, which the vast majority of cities do not, we serve as a check and balance for those commercial haulers. So somebody is going to be dealing with hauler X or hauler Y, and it's on a geographic zone system. They're going to say, oh my goodness, look at how much the price is going to be, as opposed to having the alternative of being able to contract with City of Glendale, and our rates are going to be rooted in what our costs are. So at least they'll have, even if it's more expensive, they'll have satisfaction that they're not getting gouged. Now maybe they'll opt to go with the commercial hauler, which is fine, but at least that peace of mind will exist in a way in Glendale that it wouldn't exist in most 90% of other cities.
Okay. Thank you. And I might just add that this first controversy isn't even between the waste haulers. Right. It's between who gets the record reflect and design the RFP for the waste haulers. So, okay.
When's the RFP coming? When are they going to come back with some kind of analysis? Sorry if you said
just to fall. We're looking fall of this year.
Okay, they don't need to rush it.
Okay, we have a motion at 8C1.
After November.
Authorizing the city manager
They're rushing
to award the professional services agreement to Stearns, Conrad, and Schmidt. I'm just making sure that we're on it. In the amount of $265,000 for the contingency. So there's a motion and a resolution. Can we have them both at the same time? Would someone like to move 8C1 and 2?
I'll move the 8C1 and 2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Devine?
Yes.
Friedman?
Yes.
Garbetian?
Yes.
Sinanian?
Yes.
Mayor Najarian?
Yes. Thank you.
Next
item, please.
Oral communications, 5 minutes. Discussion is limited to items not a part of this agenda. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Council may question or respond to the speaker, but there will be no debate or decision. The city manager may refer the matter to the appropriate department for investigation and report.
Thank you. Tamara Movsesian.
Mayor, would you like to give her 2 more minutes for translations?
Yes.
Ես պատասխանատու եմ բոլոր իմ խոսքերի համար, ինչ որ հիմա կասեմ։
I'm responsible for my words that I will say right now.
Անցյալ անգամ ես որ խոսեցի, այդ իմ տանս կապակցությամբ, հիմա ես հրապարակորեն ասում է Michael H. Miller-ը, իմ լոյերս, եւ իրեք գիդը Jean Perry Պաշեդիկներ են ֆրոդետ
I spoke last time regarding my case, and I would like to publicly say that Michael H. Miller and his wife Jean Perry are frauds.
Որովհետև ապսի, երբ որ ես իմ քեյսը վերցրեցի դատարանից, ապսի 12-ին հունվարի դատավորը նշանակել է, որ լսում է լինելու մայիսի 4-ին եւ պետք է իմ տատիրուհու Մարտասյուի լոյերը բերի համապատասխան դոկումենտներ բացատրության համար.
Okay, I got a copy of my case on January 12th and realized that there is a hearing on May 4 when my lawyer has to present documents.
Իմ լոյերս չէ, դատարանը.
When
Իմ լոյերս չի ասել այս դոկումենտի մասից.
my own lawyer has not told me about this document.
Ապսի 14-ին հունվարի ինքը ստորագրել է տվել այս դոկումենտը, որ անցյալ անգամ ձեզ ցույց տվեցի ու ասեցի ստիպել է, որ ես ստորագրեմ.
On January 14, I showed you a document that I signed through my lawyer and told you that they made me sign this document.
Ապսի 15-ին դատավորը զարմացած, որ ես համաձայնվել եմ այս քեյսը փակելու, գրել է այս թուղթը, որ Սարմադալի է, այս գիդը շահելու էր, բայց դե որ ուզում է փակի դատը, ինչ պետք է անեմ, իրեն համաձայնություն տա.
On January the 15th, judge was surprised that I had signed this paperwork, and they mentioned that this was a case that I was going to win.
Michael Miller-ը ինձ ասել էր, որ ես ոչ մեկի չասեմ, որ ես թուղթը ստորագրել եմ.
Michael Miller told me not to tell anyone regarding me signing this document.
Որովհետև եթե ասեմ, ես տարված եմ.
Because if I had told anyone, I would lose.
Բայց ես արդեն տարված էի, որ ստորագրել էի. Ինձ իդիոտի տեղ ա դրել.
But I already lost when I signed it. He treats me like an idiot.
Ապսի իդիտ Փետրվարի ինձ բերում են այս թուղթը.
On February 9th, I was presented with this paper.
Որ ես ապսի 28-ին կամ պետք է դուրս գամ այդ տանից, կամ ինձ շերիֆը գալու է դուրս գցի փողոց.
Which states that on the 28th, I should either vacate the premises or the sheriff will come and force me outside onto the street.
Michael Miller-ը, երբ ես իրեն ասեցի, ասեց ոչ մի վտանգավոր բան չկա.
When I spoke to Michael Miller regarding this, he told me that there is nothing dangerous.
Ինձ City Etherdi տեղակալը պարտականա պարտկա ու դա ինձ ասել է, որ մարտայտունը քանդելու է.
City attorney assistant told me that
Չէ, Michael Miller դա ասել, որ իբրև թե City Etherdi-ի տեղակալը իրանա պարտք, Michael-ին է պարտք.
Michael told me that apparently the city attorney assistant owes him some money. And that the building was going to demolish. And told me not to worry about it.
Ես ադհանգստացած, որտև ես փաստաթղթերը ինձ մոտ հայտնվեց ապսի 22-ին փետրվարի, ես ինքս գնացել եմ դատարանից, խնդրել եմ կլերկը կապիարը ինձ տվել է.
I was worried regarding this, and on February 22nd, I went to the court, and the clerk gave me copies of my case.
Բնականաբար ես վճարել եմ
And
դրա
of course,
համար.
I paid for it.
Դրանից հետո ես խոճապահար զանգահարում եմ Michael Miller-ին. Թարգմանիչի շտորիվ ասում եմ, որ այս ահավոր բան է, էս ի՞նչ ես արել դու իմ գլխին.
After that, I contacted through through translated with my attorney asking what to do and just to get some kind of explanation.
Ասպա ոչինչ բժշկիցը թուղթ բեր։ Ես այդ հարցը վաղը կլուծեմ։
Yeah, he told me to bring a note from a doctor and that he would solve that problem the next day.
Ես ասի ես գործ չունեմ։ Ասես դե զանգահարի բժշկուհուտ եւ այլը в общем։ Ես այդ արդեն գժված, ոչ թե գժված, այլ սիրտս վատացած, ճշումս բարձրացած խնդրել եմ իմ ընկերուհին ինձ տարելա բժշկի մոտ։
I had some medical issues, blood pressure, and I asked someone to take me to a doctor.
Այդեղ եկան էի վատացել, որից սկզբից ոչ օգնություն է ցույց տվել։
But I was in such a bad condition that I was the one who got doctor's attention first.
Հետո Մայքլ Մյուլլերը զանգահարեց, բժշկուհին ասեց, որ ես կարող եմ գրել, թե ինչքան վատ է հիմա այս մարդը։
Then Michael Mueller called and the nurse told him that this person is in a doctor, I apologize, is a very bad condition and that I can write a note regarding it.
Այդ թուղթը վերցնելուց հետո արդեն 7-ին մոտ էր։ Ասեցի տանեմ հասցնեմ իրեն տուն, որտեվ կարող է գիշերը մեռնեմ։
After getting that paper, it was a little late. It was around 7 p.m. And I wanted to get that document to him in case I died that night.
Դուրը բաց չարեց։
He didn't open the door.
Հաջորդ օրը ինձ զանգահարում է, ասում է դու հիվանդ ես, քեզ հոգեբուժի կարիք ա պետք, ես քեզանից հրաժարվում եմ։
And next day he called me and told me that I have issues, that I need to talk to a psychologist. And that I'm dropping your case. I'm asking you to wait because I'm not going to come back to the city meeting hall. This is the last time.
Իրենք կապված են քոլեջի բորդի հետ, Արանաջարան, խնդրում եմ լսեք։
You have 1 minute.
They are affiliated to the college board, Aranajarian. I'm asking you to listen.
Please. Որովհետև Մայքլ Մյուլլերի գիդը ջիտ փերին նույնպես դատի ատվել քոլեջին։
Since because Michael Murray's wife Jim Perry also sued the college.
Իմ տղայիս քեյսը խաղացնելով Jim Perry փող աշխատում։
They played around with my son's case while Jim Perry was making money.
Որի շնորհիվ North Carolina-ում տուն առե, ռանչ առե, ձիեր առե։
Which resulted into certain purchases in North Carolina, including a ranch, car, horses, etc.
Իմ կարծիքով այս գործով պետք է զբաղվի արդեն white collar-ի մարդիկ։ Ինչ հարց ունեք, ինձ տվեք, ես ձեզ պատասխանեմ։
Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Movsesian.
In my opinion, this matter should be dealt with Mike Kohler, and if you have any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Okay, thank you. I don't have an answer for you. I don't know if my colleagues have an answer, but we've heard your story. Thank you for coming. Next speaker. Next speaker is Belinda Meyer. Thank you. Do not translate, please. Your time is up. Your time is up, please. Your time is up. Your time is up. May we have some order. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, my problems and concerns are so mundane compared to all this stuff going on. But I am a 40-year resident of Glendale. I've been going to the farmers markets for 34 years. I'm an oncology nurse, and I have, 3, not dependents, but family members who are vegetarians. My big complaint is the farmers market at Chess Park. It's not working either. And so what are we going to do about it? The one when it was on Brandon Wilson and Broadway, that seemed to be the best. And that, the merchants complained, and so they moved it to Maryland and Wilson. That didn't work because there was no foot traffic. And now here at Chess Park, most of the vendors have left. And I know, or I go to, well, I know of 20 other farmers markets, and I go to 3, Pasadena, sometimes on Saturday, but always Burbank on Saturdays, and Atwater on Sundays. So I know, have been to over 20, really. And so for the last 34 years. And so, but, Glendale, we need, a farmer's market. And I just don't know what's going on. But some of the merchants have told me that, the people running it, they charge more, for them than other markets. And so they just don't want to pay those fees. And so, what can we do here in Glendale, to have a farmer's market? And also the one that was at the Americana, it was on Sundays. It didn't work either. So, but it would be nice, for our health to have a farmer's market and to have, non-processed foods and organic things without having to go to Whole Foods and a few other places that charge you more. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Paul. Is Paul left? I guess Paul has left. Margaret Hammond.
Managed to stay awake. So anyway, by now I should be home resting. But my name is Margaret Hammond, 60-year resident of Glendale. Good evening, Your Honor, members of the council, saw some of you earlier, and staff. Forget 134. Just remember the earthquakes. Nobody mentioned earthquakes. Remember what happened to the earthquake when Santa Monica went down the freeway and the ones up north, going north on the 5? Took them a year to put it back. Imagine having parks on top of that going down. You'd never get that cleared out enough to use the freeway. Anyway, South Glendale needs more park space, not less. By giving away our city property to any group, that sets a very bad precedent. It could mean that any other nonprofit group could come in and claim the same rights, a gift of property. And we don't feel that that would be a good idea at all. Other nonprofit groups in Glendale bought their own lots to build their churches or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. And planning the Incarnation Church purchased the adjoining church property that became available to enlarge their parking lot and so forth and build what they needed, their schools or whatever, and have a huge mortgage for so doing. But now, especially talk about giving away our park in South Glendale, where half the population of Glendale, 100,000 people live. It's nonsense. The city gave this group a free lot on Louis Street, which was included in the $12 million deal that we paid for the property on Brand, which was assessed at $850,000. $12 million deal. And it's on the record. And all of this, that much money, was just to enable Caruso to be able to build his Americana. But then what did we do? We turned around and gave Mr. Caruso the deeds for $1 to all that property. We are not very good business people. It seems to be that, there was to be no closing of Harvard or Orange Streets. And he took us to court and said, no, that was not going to be the case, and he was not going to have those big billboards. Why do I know? Because he sued me and 14 others who objected to what he was putting in and the deal he was getting of getting the property for free. So I really think that we need to keep our purse strings closed when it comes to giving away our city property. After all, we, the taxpayers, pay for that out of our whatever taxes and so forth. So I don't think it should be given away at all. And that's my feeling on that one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Margaret. No, I don't know. You may have some of the facts wrong on that, but we can discuss that off camera, Margaret. Do we have any new business? Yes, Ms. Devine.
Yes, I'd like to move that the city attorney be and hereby is authorized to enter into a retainer agreement with Louis Brisbois, Bisgard and Smith LLP, Dana A. Fox, to assist the city attorney in connection with the personal injury lawsuit to Jarek versus City of Glendale. The retainer agreement shall, in addition to other provisions, contain a fee cap for the handling of said matter.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Devine.
Yes.
Friedman.
Yes.
Garpetian.
Yes.
Sinanian. Mayor Najarian.
Yes. That concludes our business agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned.
Here we go.